I'd like to call order the September 25th Planning Board meeting. The first thing on our agenda is the minutes from September 11th. Mr. Secretary?
Mr. Chairman, I recommend approval of the minutes of September 11, 2018, as corrected.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The next thing on our agenda is public comment. This is for something that's not on our agenda tonight. We'll give anyone who needs to speak about something 2 minutes. If you'd please step up, identify yourself, and please step up.
Grant Walker, 71 Philadelphia Street, and I have a point of order, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
This is public comment, not a point. You're talking about our meeting. I don't know if that's appropriate.
Okay. It's just that I anticipate that part of my public comment you might cover it in the meeting. That's why I wanted to do the point of
To
order.
be clear, if it's on our agenda, you wait till we
Right.
call it.
Okay. I want to make a couple recommendations. Number one, I assume you might be doing this anyway, but please, I recommend, announce to us the rules for tonight's meeting, how much time we will have, how much time the meeting will be, how much time each speaker will have, what we may talk about and what we may not. Please announce the rules. Secondly, please tell us, this is a second recommendation, please tell us what the process will be between tonight's meeting and town meeting as far as the solar articles go. Is it true that the planning board can change its articles up to 10 minutes prior to the town meeting? What will be the process? What will happen between this meeting and that town meeting? Third, please consider some kind of meeting between now and town meeting in which we might have some back and forth, some dialogue, develop some kind of working relationship between very interested people in the community and the planning board on the solar articles. And especially, please, involve the town energy committee in some working relationship on these articles between now and town meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's that? The next item on our agenda is approval not required. Tom, do we have any A&Rs in?
We do not, sir.
Do not. Now we're entering the public hearings, and tonight we will discuss the rules for the public hearings. The goal this evening is to have a hearing on all these articles, and so everyone can be heard. Everyone will be given 2 minutes to come up and talk about it. If the presenter of the case of one of them needs more than 2 minutes, that's okay, but anyone from the public can come up and have their 2 minutes, and will we give 5 minutes to the presenter? We'll give them whatever time they need.
Yeah, because I don't know how long
We'll
it's
play it
gonna
by
take.
ear,
Some are
but
more
we'll-
complex than others.
For the petitioner's articles, we should give them whatever time they need to finish their presentation. We're not trying to limit that. And remember, this is a hearing, so what our goal will be to listen to everybody and then close the hearing and then move on to the next one. We'll try to get through all the hearings, and if we have time, after we finish the entire agenda and the board wants to, we may go back and start having some dialogue amongst the board on that, or we may do that at another night, but we'll have a hearing and take them all under advisement. The goal tonight is to make sure everyone's been heard. As you remember, when we go to town meeting, the clerk gets up and announces the date of the hearing, and he says flat out that everyone that wanted to be heard was heard, and that's what's happening tonight. We're here to listen, okay? That's what's going on. All right. The first article for tonight's discussion is, notices. Thank you, Paul. I told you I'd forget. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, there are 10 separate articles included in the public hearings this evening. 8 of those articles do not require butters to be notified. They include Article 6, Coastal Pond Overlay District, Article 7, Site Plan Review, Article 11, Moratorium on Solar Energy System, Article 13, Dimensional Regulations, Article 14, Accessory Apartments, Article 9, A petition by Mr. Zwig. Article 10, petition of Christopher Lynch. Article 15, petition of Kevin Clower. The two remaining articles were notified by public comment. Article 8, Article 8 is the solar overlay district, and 125 abutters were notified by certified mail for Article 8 only. And the last one was Article 25, which is the petition of Mr. Clower. And in that case, 7 abutters were notified by certified mail for Article 25 only. Thank you.
Okay. The first hearing will open is Article 6, Coaster Pond Overlay District. Virginia?
Good evening, members of the Planning Board. I'm Virginia Valiela. I'm the Vice Chair of the Water Quality Management Committee. And the Article 6 that we're about to discuss is a joint effort between the Planning Board and the Water Quality Committee to update this very important bylaw of the town. I'm going to give you a short history of the article and then specifically explain the map that you're looking at. In 1988, which was 30 years ago, this planning board presented to town meeting the first coastal pond overlay district. This is a water quality issue. That particular article in 1988 included all of the watersheds, now I'm told I can look at this, all of the watersheds that discharged to Vineyard Sound and this area down here, with the exception of Falmouth Inner Harbor. So a great portion of the town, more than half, of the watersheds were put into the Coastal Pond Overlay District. In 2001, the Planning Board updated that overlay district map by adding some watersheds, a couple of watersheds, on that emptied. Now, Tom, can you help me? I don't know how that happened. That emptied into Buzzards Bay. This flip to the next.
That's fine, so we're just gonna go with an up arrow there, so you're back to where you're at. I'm gonna take this with me?
Yes.
Just in case you move it again.
I
I'll put it
think
back.
that's a good idea. Don't want it. So in 2001, a couple more watersheds were added that emptied into Buzzards Bay. In 2003, the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection hired the U.S. Geological Survey to make an updated map of all of the watersheds on the Upper Cape. So not only Falmouth, but also included Mashpee, Bourne, and Sandwich. And they wanted a consistent database for the entire Upper Cape because some of these watersheds are shared with other towns. They're not just in Falmouth. In particular, we have Megansett, which is up in the upper north end. We share with Bourne, and Wacoit Bay is shared with Mashpee and actually a piece of Sandwich as well. The Geological Survey finished that work in 2005. And at that time, the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection hired Dr. Brian Howes from the School of Marine Science and Technology, which is based at UMass Dartmouth. And he was charged with studying all of the potentially impaired watersheds in Falmouth. He actually did it for all of the Cape and some off-Cape towns as well. And it was his task to develop a baseline study of the water quality of each of these estuaries and coastal ponds, and the benthic and aquatic life in those areas, and to lay the basis for setting water quality standards where needed. Those studies were then reviewed first at the state level, and then were passed to EPA in Boston, and once those studies were finalized, they set a standard, a water quality standard, which is called a TMDL, Total Maximum Daily Load of Nitrogen. And those TMDLs are binding on the town. it turned out there were 4 more watersheds that should have been on this coastal pond overlay district as a result of the studies done by Mr. Howes and approved by the state. And those 4 additional watersheds were Rand's Canal and Fiddler's Cove up here in North Falmouth, Quistit Harbor down here in Woods Hole area, and Falmouth Inner Harbor. This is this yellow one. So here is Article 6. This map now includes all of the 14 impaired watersheds in Falmouth. It shows their updated boundaries for those watersheds, and it is a database that is consistent with the same database being used by Mashpee, Sandwich, and Bourne. This database is located at the Cape Cod Commission. All of the engineering companies on the Cape use it. And once this article is voted by town meeting, it will be available through the town's GIS department. I'm obviously urging the board to, well, this is your article. We will be urging town meeting to approve this update to the existing coastal pond overlay district. I'm going to anticipate one question that might come out of the audience, and that is, was there much change between the old map from 1988 and the current map? And the answer is that there were minor adjustments in the boundaries. So the Green Pond watershed is slightly narrower, and the Great Pond watershed is slightly broader. The original map had divided the Waquoit watershed into sub-watersheds. So there was one for Childs River, one for Quashnet River, one for Hamblin Pond, and so on. But it's actually one watershed. So it's represented on this map in green as one watershed. So you have here everything that the town is now responsible for in terms of meeting total maximum daily loads. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone from the audience that has a question or would like to make a comment on this?
I move that we, seeing nobody with questions or comments, I move that we close this and take it under advisement.
Second.
Oh, wait a minute, John.
I just have one question. Did I understand you correctly that there are some areas that have been reduced? Some ground areas that have been reduced?
Great Pond to Green Pond is what you said.
It turned out that the line that had been drawn in 1988 between Great Pond and Green Pond wasn't exactly where the updated information led, so it's not, you might say for one watershed it's slightly reduced, but the rules of this coastal pond overlay apply to all coastal pond watersheds. So the fact that something might have been in Green Pond and is now in Great Pond is in a sense an academic question.
I have a question on that.
Thank you.
And
And one other question.
Sorry.
I turned the light off for the people at home, but I don't know if I should leave it off or turn it back on. Because it puts the,
Oh,
dark.
puts me in the dark.
wanna
I
do
don't mind.
that, but-
I think it's okay if we, well, you,
See it a lot
We got
better.
new cameras, too.
yeah, that's much brighter than it used to be. I think it's okay. And it also makes it for the person at the podium, they can see.
Yes,
You don't
it
get the
makes it a lot
reflection.
easier for me
You
to see.
get blinded if the
It's
lights are on.
okay if
Yeah.
it's on? or-
Yes, I think it's fine the way it is. Just leave it alone.
Right now,
I think it's
okay.
good.
Don't touch
All
it,
right.
don't.
Thank you, John.
This is new. We're only a week or two into having this set up.
Jim, I just have a comment.
Yeah.
I think it's very important to pass this article because we have to have a consistent database with the other communities that are sharing this, and it does help the Water Quality Management Committee to address the issues. So I think it's a very important bylaw change.
Thank you.
And my question is down the road. When we did the Little Pond Watershed District, when they did the sewer lines matched the Little Pond Waterlay District. And so it sounds like the next one on our agenda is Great Pond. It might have gotten a little larger. Will that change the plans for the sewering in that same area? Will it be tied in with this as the Little Pond Landing was? Little Pond?
Well, tied in, the answer is yes, because when we did the Little Pond watershed, we were using updated information. It wasn't in the town's bylaw, but the engineers were using updated information.
So
Okay.
they'll be using this information.
So, oh, absolutely.
And that's-
And they
that's-
have all along.
And that's the answer to my question.
Great. Okay?
So there
Any
has
other
been
questions?
a motion and it has been seconded
Yeah.
to close the hearing.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. That's, well, moving on. Article 7, Site Plan Review. Mr. Bott.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, audience, I'm Tom Bott, I'm the town planner here in Falmouth, Mass. And we've been working for the last couple of months on a few different zoning articles that were based on conversations in-house as well as in the broader community as well. The first, Article 7 on site plan review, would be to amend section 24192 applicability and change the word gross floor area to structure. The genesis of this recommended change was for solar canopies, solar trees, some people have called them, in that the bylaw calls out for site plan review for gross floor area, but not for the size of a structure. So this change simply makes, instead of 1,000 square foot of gross floor area, 1,000 square foot of structure. So anything that has a canopy, anything that's 1,000 square foot, whether it has a floor or not, would come through site plan review. It doesn't prohibit anything. It will apply to anything that size, but it's largely geared on identifying the issue of when someone wants to put in solar on a commercial site, what's the process for that, and it goes through site plan review. So this is different from what we're going to see in a few minutes about the large-scale solar PV. But in this case, it was a minor amendment to the bylaw just to equate 1,000 square foot of surface area, that structure versus floor area. And happy to take any questions.
Step up, identify yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Grant Walker, 71 Philadelphia Street. My question is with regard to a solar canopy, how is the square footage measured? Is it from the four corners, the bottom of the post, as if there's a rectangle between those four posts? Is it the canopies up above, which might actually extend beyond the post, or how is it the 1,000 square feet measured? Thank you.
We have definition of structure in the bylaw.
We do. So the structure, if it is a solar canopy on a roof, it's the size of the roof. It's not the size of the solar, it's the size of the structure. So if you've got a canopy and it's got four corners on it, like this podium you're just at, the audience can't see that there's a glass piece in here. So if the glass of this podium is the solar and the edges of the podium are the structure, it's measured from the edge of the podium. So it's the size of the structure, the four corners of the structure.
May I follow that up? I was trying to get, maybe I didn't make myself.
Please step up.
Thank you. Grant Walker again. I may not be using the right term, so forgive me, but with like parking lot canopies is what I'm thinking of, rather than panels on the roof of a structure. Are they included in this, and how is the square footage of lot measured for the parking lot canopies, such as the canopies at Kenyon Market?
The size of the roof.
The roof of the solar
There's only,
panels?
of the structure.
Okay.
And structure is defined in our bylaws. I thought Mr. Bott made it clear, using the example, that the glass panel there would be like the solar panel and the edges would be the roof. I thought that was fairly clear. Have another question?
No, I think I'm getting it. It's just looking at the podium there, it seemed to me that represents kind of like a building that the panels might be on, but in a parking lot, it's just posts and then,
It's a structure.
but it is a structure. I see what you're saying.
That is the point. I mean, I understand what you're asking. We're trying to be very clear and precise and call it a structure.
Okay, I appreciate that.
That's-
Thank you
that's-
very much.
Don't know how to say it any clearer. Any other questions? Please step up.
Hi, my name is Megan O'Reilly. I'm a resident of Precinct 3 and an architect. I've practiced on the Cape for the past 9 years with a focus on energy-efficient design. I have a lot of concerns with Article 7, changing the wording. 1,000 square foot solar array is pretty small and would trigger practically everything coming in front of the board. This extra step and added cost of filing and attending a planning board meeting alone might deter a number of business owners from looking into solar as an option to offset energy cost. Is there any outlined criteria the board can share with the public prior to town meeting on how a planning board determination would be made for a ground mount solar array over 1,000 square feet? At this point, the criteria for judging if a project gets passed or denied is seemingly a little vague and up to the board's discretion. It's a tremendous amount of power to yield to a board that might be making their decision based solely on aesthetics of the solar panels and their personal desired aesthetic for the town. I personally don't like the appearance of a large paved parking lot right at the street's edge, but this is the current condition of many existing commercial properties in Falmouth. And in most cases, these parking lots provide the most suitable, if not only option available for to those properties for solar arrays. If we are taking the planning board's published comments about Kenyon's market as an indicator of their future mind frame when voting, then we have to assume that any project where the existing parking lot is at the street's edge would come under similar scrutiny and most likely be denied. There are many existing commercial properties that were built decades ago and whose existing roof structure does not meet current code. These buildings would require reinforcement to hold up a roof-mounted solar. This option is costly and often requires a business to close while the work is being done. And a ground mount option is something that can be done with minimal impact to the business. Looking beyond the subjective aesthetics of a solar canopy on the town's landscape, these pavilions provide functional use to an otherwise underutilized and already disturbed portion of the site. They provide protection from the sun, rain, and snow for vehicles as well as people. They reduce heat island effect, which occurs with large, open, paved surfaces, and they can be designed to aid with water runoff and stormwater management, which is something I think Falmouth really needs. They can also be designed for water collection to be used for on-site landscape irrigation, and as more electric cars enter the market, Falmouth as a tourist destination needs to keep up with the ever-changing landscape. Charging stations paired with solar canopies create a circular relationship and potential cash flow for the business owners. First, from the charging station itself, and second, from the fact that a level 2 charging station takes between 2 to 4 hours, depending on the car and the charging station. That's 2 hours of shopping, 2 hours at a movie, 2 hours eating at a restaurant. These solar canopies represent so much more to the future of Falmouth, and we should not let our own subjective, personal idea of how Falmouth should look get in the way that these could benefit our town. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? We got Bob, sorry, one other person's coming up first. I'm just saying I saw you.
Michael Stone, 16 West Falmouth Highway. So I have concerns as well with this article. If the 1,000 square feet applies to both rooftop as well as canopy, you would effectively require site plan review for almost every solar project in town except for very small residential solar projects. Typically over the course of a year, in Falmouth, there are about 150 solar projects per year. So that would trigger about, probably over 100 site plan reviews. So because of those significant concerns and the concerns that were previously raised, I think this particular article should be revisited. Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
I asked Mr. Stone a question.
Yes.
You referred to how many there were, and that 1,000 square feet is too small. It would corral practically everything. If you were to say, if I were to ask you what would be an appropriate square footage, could you answer that? That wouldn't wouldn't even affect all the homeowners, is what you were implying, I believe.
Mm-hmm. So 1,000 square feet's about 31 feet by 31 feet. So it would probably have to be probably half that, or potentially smaller, I'd say. Yeah.
Half it for, no, I'm saying, what would you recommend? Carte blanche or
I don't have
2,000
a
square feet?
specific
or-
number. I have other reservations with the article itself, but it would need to be much smaller than that. Oh, you're saying, okay,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, you don't want to capture that many projects, like I said, for this particular.
I have a question. You said there were hundreds in the last year. I only
Yep.
know of 2. Could you identify 5 that you know about?
So we're talking about all projects, because.
No, that would be triggered by this bylaw that are,
So if this applied to just canopy projects, is that the question?
it applies to structures. Yeah, yes. Well, not on their roofs. If you're building a new building and you put a solar panel on the roof, yes, it applies to it. If you put it in your back, if you put it on your rooftop or in your garage, it doesn't apply at all. This only applies to when you build a new structure.
That was a little different than some of the comments, but I think in terms of the number of solar projects in Falmouth, 99% of them are rooftop
Okay,
projects.
I'd agree with you then, yeah.
Yeah. So it's very few are canopy or ground mount. But as people are looking for additional uses for underutilized spaces, such as a parking lot, a solar canopy is quite suitable use.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
Sir?
Yeah.
I'm also curious, you mentioned 150 solar projects. I've not heard anything near that number. Can you provide some basis or estimate
Certainly.
where that information comes from?
Yeah, so it's from the Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources. And that information is put out on a monthly basis.
Mhm.
And a lot of these projects aren't visible from the road.
Right.
Many of them, you're not even aware if there's a project on this building as well, obviously. But some may not be aware of that. Yeah. So that's the current pace, about 150 solar projects per year in the town of Falmouth.
So the vast majority of those would be on existing structures,
Exactly.
so
We
they wouldn't
We
necessarily
wouldn't have
apply
anything
to
to do with
this.
those.
Yeah.
Or residential. That we
So
wouldn't
this
have
would
anything to
just
do
be for canopy.
for
or ground mount.
structures of any kinds. Like, say, somebody wanted to put a barn in their front yard, or in a building, and they wanted to leave the doors off it and put, it would be a structure. We would count it that if it was made of wood, and they put panels on it, we would call that a structure.
Mhm.
You know,
Okay.
That's what we're just saying. We're just saying if it's 1,000 square feet, we're gonna call it a structure. And we're not out against solar, but there's other things we consider: crowding, light, air movement, lot coverage ratios. There's a whole myriad of things that we'd go under site plan review. And we just feel that these are structures and they should go under site plan review.
Thank you.
Bob? Mr. Ament, I should say.
Thank you. I'm Bob Ament, an attorney who deals with land use issues. And I'm just concerned about the unintended consequences of this change of language. For instance, in historic districts, driveways are considered structures. So all of a sudden, they would be subject to site plan review besides the historical commission review that's presently required. The language 1,000 square feet or more of structure, it's really adding an awful lot. Now you've got exterior decks, swimming pools, tennis courts. You're really adding a lot that's now subject to potential review. And I don't know why, if the problem you're trying to address isn't the concern about solar panels, why you just didn't specify that that solar arrays in certain locations or whatever are also subject to site plan review, rather than changing the language from gross floor area to structure. It's easier to calculate gross floor area, and we know we're talking about multiple floors. We know which floors count and don't, which basements count and which don't, because that goes into what gross floor area is. And structure, I just think, is a very expansive term, and you've made a very big change, and I'm not sure you intended to do so.
I have a question for you. I don't believe we do site plan review on residential properties.
That's correct. It doesn't say residential properties. It says single-family
But
or
they don't come to
two-family
the planning board.
structures. It doesn't say that the driveways
But-
wouldn't be subject to review. So
But
that's
they
simple
are,
and clear.
aren't they already? If it's a commercial property and they have a driveway on it, we look at lot coverage ratios, and we look at structures. We already do. We look
That
at
depends
paving,
on the si-
drainage.
that depends on the size of the structure. If it's a small enough structure, less than 1,000 square feet, then you wouldn't. Thank you.
Anybody else? First,
Hi, my name is Rosemary Drager Carey. I'm from North Falmouth Precinct 5. I'm here today wearing many hats, member of the Falmouth Energy Committee, member of the League of Women Voters Natural Resources Committee, town meeting member, and community organizer for 350 Cape Cod. We're the grassroots climate action group that recently brought together more than 100 Falmouth residents and neighbors to spell out SOS on Surf Drive Beach. And we were saying in a very public way that we're in the middle of a climate emergency, and we called on our local leaders to be as bold as possible in the transition to renewable energy. I am concerned about Article 7 and its impact on solar canopies. I think it would be very detrimental for the reasons that my colleague from the Energy Committee already, Megan O'Reilly, already stated. Our current bylaws have allowed local businesses like Kenyon's Market to invest in solar, do it in a responsible and aesthetically pleasing way, and Kenyon's and the Ice Arena have been able to substantially lower their cooling and air conditioning costs while providing their customers with the benefits of more competitive prices, a parking lot that shelters them from the rain, snow, sun, the parking lot desert island effect, and to many customers and skaters and visitors to the town, this is a very desirable, attractive addition to their facilities. Many people like myself and like the 100 people at Surf Drive Beach prefer to patronize businesses with green features, and so by not allowing businesses to invest in solar readily, then they lose out. So, as well as do Falmouth residents lose out. We should be rolling out the red carpet for solar energy in Falmouth, not placing more restrictions on it. The time is now. We should be doing everything we can to transition away from fossil fuels, which are the main contributors to greenhouse gas emissions, and switch to cleaner, healthier, renewable energy. Thank you.
Mr. Walker?
Thank you, Grant Walker, 71 Philadelphia Street. I have tried to find out specifically what is involved in a site plan review, and the information that I've been able to see leaves things too vague for me. Is it possible? I'm hoping that it'll be possible to actually specify, well, this would be good, that would be bad, whatever. What happens? What actually happens in a site plan review other than measurements? You know, lot size, lot coverage, setbacks, whatever. What are the other more flexible things or not so definable things in a site plan review? That would help me to know what this article is actually going to bring about. Thank you.
The site plan review is spelled out specifically in the Code of Falmouth. Tom, do you have that? Do you want to read it to him, or would you like to?
And if I may, before I get into that, I want to apologize for my ellipse. Those 3 dots between use and on a lot. For brevity, I didn't put them on the slide, but what the bylaw says on the applicability is any new development or expansion use other than one single-family or one two-family residence on which a lot would add. So it's basically site plan exempts single and two-family sites. So it's strictly for commercial purposes. Under Section 240, 191 through 198, it lays out the procedures for a site plan and what's expected on a site plan. Those are largely where you're putting fences, walls, trees, landscaping, driveways. It requires a stormwater calculation to make sure that you're not overwhelming the site with impervious pavement. And we have been doing this for years and years and years with, frankly, through process that makes sure, and you'll see one if you stay late enough tonight to hear about a site plan that we're doing later this evening. But essentially, the site plan requirements are, where's your stuff? Is it work on the site? We have them vetted by our local engineers. We have them reviewed to make sure that things aren't in conflict, turning motions, parking spaces, driveway aisles, stormwater calculations to make sure things stay on the site as they're supposed to stay on the site, and to minimize any negative externalities you might get from developing a site.
The woman, do you ask you to come back up?
Thank you for the clarification, Tom, on what would be covered for a site plan, but how would that be viewed with solar, if it was a solar canopy? If it met all the stormwater calcs and it provides the parking and it's within the
It would be considered a
setbacks?
structure.
No, I
for
totally
lot
understand.
coverage ratios.
But, so say I presented Stop and Shop, and I meet your allotted parking spots, I meet your stormwater drainage calcs by filtering water in, would that mean that it would
You-
get approved as soon
And
as
meet
it went to
lot
site
coverage
plan?
ratios by structure? Yes.
And so there's no way, because there were some comments in the paper that that the board would prefer solar canopies behind buildings, which is great in new construction.
We would also prefer parking behind buildings,
Yes,
too.
and that would be great. I would love to, like as a subset right here, say, like, that'd be great. Please put that in the zoning and planning bylaws to move our commercial buildings towards the street edge and parking behind. Solar behind, perfect. What I'm asking is there's existing lots of Walmart and there's Stop and Shop. If they meet all of what you just outlined, and I bring you a site plan and it's got solar all over it, is that something that the board's gonna be okay with?
Lot coverage ratios by structure. If you meet that, it
So
should be
you're
fine.
saying, I'm more familiar with residential. So residential for most places is 15% lot
We don't
coverage.
do
If the building cover, okay, so hypothetically, sorry, I don't do a lot of commercial. I'm not sure what your zoned lot coverage is. If Stop and Shop is at their max lot coverage already with the existing footprint, it would be a no for solar if it covered the parking lot. Because you're counting it as structure. So you're
There-
ixnaying it. Okay.
There's a way to get a variance from the.
Yeah, but variances, we all know those are super fun to go through and unlikely. Okay, I just wanted clarification on what the criteria would be.
I'd be happy to give you an example of what we might look for.
Okay.
But please be aware that
It's a
we're
might.
supposed to be simply listening, but you've asked a question that obviously a lot of people are interested in. All of you have said that these structures will help with stormwater runoff capture and direction. A lot of these do not have any green space that would be added to it. Perhaps, I'm saying perhaps, we would be looking for some green space that could utilize that runoff.
Okay. I love that. I love anything that
And
can capture
So
stormwater.
that's just a perhaps that we might be looking at. I'm not debating you, I'm not
No, no,
specifically
no.
answering your question.
But it's a
say
lot, I think you
landscaping that
can
would aid.
understand, y'all are putting up a big article. I mean, it's a lot. And for the future of Falmouth, in 20 years, we could still be holding this to lot coverage. And some places have already maxed out their existing site coverage. Because, of course, these big warehouse buildings are like, what lot can I get? What's the cost? I mean, it all comes down to numbers. So we might be saying that X percentage of our commercial business district can't do solar unless they reinforce their roofs, which, I mean, you look at Walmart's roof, it's these trusses that were done when, I mean, I'm sure they're undersized even now by our standards. It's a lot. I mean, we're saying maybe no to a lot if we're holding it to lot coverage. Anyways, thank you for your time.
Mr. Walker? But I will limit you, this is your third time on this subject.
Yes.
You can't come back again.
On this or any others?
Just this one.
Thank you so much. Does aesthetics come into it? Does a consideration of how the structure fits in with the surrounding neighborhood come into site plan review? Aesthetics and how things fit in.
I believe 240-216 is neighborhood character is impacted, especially if it's a special permit also. Many times we're doing site plan review and a special permit. I think Kenyon's should have been a special permit. There was a special permit there in the past, and I believe they should have come to us anyway. I don't know about Stop and Shop. That could be a special permit as well. But yeah, to answer your question, yes. 240-216 neighborhood character, views and vistas. Are
242-16?
part of our bylaw.
Thank you.
Has everyone been heard on this issue? Motion to close. Tom, do you have anything else?
No, sir.
Not on this one, but there's another one under Article 7.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
So, yeah, we're going to move to the second bullet point
Motion to
on the
close
slide.
the hearing.
well, do you want, should we
Oh,
move
and
to close?
subsection of it, oh, the other part of it. Go ahead, sorry. Next part of it, the language, okay.
In addition, this is something also from the conversation we had with the building commissioner, Rod Palmer, back, I'm gonna say it was June, I was gonna write down what the date was, about site plan review. So the planning board requires a site plan and requires these elements to be included in the site plan, and it's up to the contractor to install them all. And our building inspector has said, we inspect buildings, we inspect the things they built, but we don't do site plans, we don't engineer site plans. We don't inspect site plans. So part of that conversation, and that evening, there was a local engineer here, some renown, who talked about the fact that when they do site plans, they have to produce an ALTA survey for mortgagees to basically say, here's what's on the property, here's what we have built, and here's what you're insuring. So along that line, we have considered a new subsection 24193C, that no certificate of occupancy will be issued until an as-built plan prepared by a registered architect, landscape architect, professional engineer has been submitted and verified by the planning board agent that all conditions of approval have been met. And I know that in recent days, I've had some calls from people about the new medical buildings going up. Did they put this stuff in they're supposed to put in? Well, that is the role of making sure the site plan is fully vetted and fully rounded out. So this new addition to the site plan bylaw would essentially create that check to say, when you get your stuff done, before you get a certificate of occupancy, present us an ALTA plan that you've got to put together for your mortgagees or whomever. We'll verify that the conditions have been met on the site that were required by the board, and then everybody's good to go.
Chairman?
It may seem minor, but I don't know who the planning board agent is. There's no definition in the bylaw of planning board agent. Language such as the town planner or his or her designee would work better. Then the town planner might designate somebody in the building department or somebody on the planning staff. But there is no planning board agent that I know of, and it's not defined.
Tom, were we gonna have the applicant's engineer present this as-built? Is that what we were talking about? I thought that's what you and I, or they would hire somebody.
Correct. So the planning board agent is, I will look back to see if it's in our bylaw, but essentially the planning board agent is the person the planning board is charged with that responsibility. Whether it is the, typically these days, the Falmouth Engineering Division that reviews those things for, as far as site plan review, or if the town was to opt to go into a 53G, which we talked about before, where there's consulting engineers, that person who reviewed the plan for the board would be the person to make sure that the plan had been vetted. But I will verify that that the planning board agent is defined, and I thought it was in our bylaw, but I will take another look. I know you've spent a lot more time with the bylaw than I have, Mr. Met, but I will check back with that. But the planning board agent essentially is the person the planning board has invested that responsibility to make sure it's right, whether it's the planner or the engineering department, or if we have a 53G consulting engineer, that person.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, I'm gonna ask you, could you just repeat, you say you gave us some options and I wasn't paying attention, would you just say them again? Of how this should read?
I simply suggested the designee of the town planner. It could be a designee of the of the planning board, but I think it's an administrative thing that the town planner can designate one or more people who are authorized to sign off on these things. And the engineering department makes sense. The building department could be the zoning enforcement officer. I think there's flexibility if the language is just tweaked a little bit.
Thank you. John?
I thought when we discussed this, one of the reasons for having the landscape architect or engineer verify that the site plan has been constructed as approved was that would be the end of it. That it wouldn't have to go to another person for review. And like Tom suggested, maybe it would be the town engineer, the engineering department, but that was part of the reason that we wanted to have this, because they've been overburdened, or maybe there's not enough staff there to do this. So it was my feeling that if an engineer puts a stamp on it and presents the plan to this board that has been constructed the way it was approved, that would be sufficient.
Isn't that what we're looking for?
This just appears to be one more step beyond that, the way that I read it.
Yes, well, clearly it would have to be a plan submitted with a stamp on it. And I've got two kids who are engineers. I can tell you they make mistakes. Mine are perfect, but engineers do make mistakes and kids do. But essentially, this is just a verification that what's on the paper is what's in the field. So whether it's our engineering department or a consulting engineer or something like that, we would make sure that it's done. It's done administratively. It wouldn't come here. It would be, I'm done with my inspections, the building department's ready to give me a certificate of occupancy, is the site plan fine? So it wouldn't be coming back to the board for that verification, it would go through staff.
So I know some departments in this town are really overloaded, and I would hate to have an occupancy held up 30 more days, 45 more days, because someone doesn't have time to review a stamped plan from an engineer. That really, it concerns me. And I thought that was the end of the process when we discussed this before. And everybody can make a mistake. Even a person reviewing it can make a mistake. We're all human, we understand that, but that was my sense, that the burden was on the applicant to have a professional review the site that has been constructed the way it was approved by this board. And we never discussed going beyond that and having another review of that review.
Well, we're getting into discussion here and not a hearing, so I agree with you. I'm not sure we are saying something different here. There's some,
Well, it sounds very easy, but it can get, it's expensive.
So I think we need to reserve this discussion
Yeah.
for when we have the planning board
Okay.
discussion
Yeah,
to
Okay,
Let's
thank
do
you,
whatever we want to do with
keep it,
this.
keep it open.
thank you.
Any other members of the public that would like to comment on this?
Okay, then I move that we close this hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
All in
Article
favor? Aye.
Article
Aye.
7.
Yep. Article 8, Solar Overlay District. Mr. Bott.
Article 8 is large-scale ground-mounted solar overlay district. The bylaw that we put together is based on DOER, Department of Energy Resources, model bylaw, and include elements from the town of Barnstable's and the town of Kingston's bylaws, where I worked and wrote a comparable bylaw there. And this would be to see if the town would vote to amend the zoning bylaw by adding a new article. As you can see, I've already had an issue with my Roman numerals. A new
43.
article XLVIII,
43.
large-scale ground-mounted solar district, to amend the zoning map by adding this large-scale ground-mounted solar overlay district along the blacksmith shop corridor, proximal to the power line easements on large parcels where tree cover and landforms have been previously impacted, as shown in a document and a map entitled Large-Scale Solar Ground-Mounted Overlay District and a map entitled Large-Scale Ground-Mounted Solar Overlay District. This information is on file in the town clerk's office. It's also on the town's website. If you go to the planning board website, you will find a tab there that has, in addition to plans under review, the various zoning articles as well. So as I pointed out, I did have a typo in my typing. It should have read Article XLVIII. Unfortunately, our consultants have recommended we get rid of the Roman numerals in the recodification, so I don't believe I'll do that again. In the article that's been proposed, we did not note all the lots that are being impacted by this. We have a map, so we may look to amend that article to include those lot numbers that are privy to the overlay district. In my conversations with the folks at Lawrence Lynch, they would also like to include one other additional lot in the overlay. So if I may, this is the basis, the starting point for developing this bylaw. This is an aerial photography of the town of Falmouth, this corridor we're talking about, with the aerial photography underneath of it. In this, you can see where the zoning is, and you can see these big white scars on the land. So that was the idea, was to look at these places that are already disturbed. There's been no shortage of people over my tenure who have said, they're gonna cut down all the trees on this piece of property to put solar up. That doesn't seem very green, even though there are people who will give you calculations and determinations that the offset for doing solar is gonna save so many trees. People don't like to see trees cut down for a solar project. So in this case, we looked at those parcels that are large and already at issue. One of the parcels that was included, was mapped initially with this, is this lot right here where you see the cursor. And I'm just gonna try something new here to zoom in, So this is one parcel that's owned by the town of Falmouth that wasn't included in the overlay district because this is under the care of the Conservation Commission. There's a preservation restriction on the piece of land, and so it wouldn't be able to be developed anyhow. So this was the genesis of creating the map. It looks like this. So this is what the zoning overlay will look like. The various colors are the underlying zoning. So this overlay district goes over AGA property, agricultural, PU, public utilities, AGAA, LIC, light industrial, public utilities, as well as AGAA. And the idea is it's not the zoning that underlies it, it's the landforms that underlie them. Looking for large parcels already disturbed area. There is one link from the southernmost portion to the northernmost portion along the power line easement. Ideally, I would have loved to have one overlay district that covered from top to bottom, but I didn't want to drag the overlay district through residential areas. So the only place it goes through a residential area is largely along the power line easement. So all these areas are shown here. It's located on 9 parcels along Blacksmith Road. There's the list of the lot numbers, the parcel numbers. This bylaw is for large-scale solar projects. It's 250 kilowatts or larger. It's on land that's previously been disturbed. It allows for both generation and storage. Smaller solar commercials, project on solar commercials we just talked about, is the subject of site plan review by the planning board, which was Article 7. There's a 7-acre minimum lot size. There's a 100-foot vegetated setback from the street. The idea here is when you drive through Falmouth, we would like Falmouth to look like Falmouth. So this 100-foot vegetated setback from the street allows solar to exist on the property without changing the landscape. Side and rear setbacks for solar would be 35 feet where solar abuts solar. Where solar abuts a residential or agricultural use, there would be a 100-foot setback on the sides. As we talked about, these are very large parcels that we're looking at in this initial overlay, and I believe this is a starting point for large-scale solar and not an end point for it. So this is sort of our attempt to create an area where solar goes. You cannot prohibit solar, you can reasonably regulate it. And by reasonably regulating on parcels that are already disturbed, that are large, and provide a buffer for the community while doing the do-gooder stuff that solar does, I think has a lot of benefit. Under the Falmouth bylaw, there's a maximum of 2 acres of tree clearing in addition to what you already have there. This would have a decommissioning bond as well. It's typically an escrow account where an engineer determines what the cost of removing an escrow or moving a solar array after it's out of its useful life. If the applicant removes it, that's fine. If not, the town is holding a bond in order to remove the solar if necessary. This is site plan review by the planning board, as is a requirement in the green communities requirements, because if some point the town decides to become a green community, we want to make sure that our zoning's not standing in the way of that. So site plan review by the planning board per the green communities requirements. For comparison, and we've had a little discussion about this, and I probably should have put this slide up earlier, for a comparison of large-scale solar versus an accessory use of solar. And at Kenyon's market, that's an accessory use of solar. Their primary use there is not creating energy. Their solar there is used to offset their energy cost. And according to the conversation I had with the Kenyons, it's going very well. There's 188.5 kilowatts total in the Kenyons. 150 of that is on the carports. On a 3.79 acre site, that's 75% of the 250 kilowatt threshold. So it would have to be something bigger than what's at Kenyons, and they have a very nicely done operation out there, nicely landscaped and things like that as well. The table below gives you an idea of how that compares to what you might put on your house. So if you're going to put 5 kilowatts on the roof of your house, you'd have 224 square foot of panels there. So you can see there's a considerable difference in scale on what's going on a residence, what's going on as an accessory use, and what's going on where solar is the principal use in the case of this overlay district. So what we did is we dug a little deeper into looking at these parcels, and so these are additional screens. These are the individual parcels that are on the property, and this is the topography to give an idea of what the topography is on the site. So we looked at this and vetted to find out parcels that, you know, are sort of ripe for solar development. In the case of the Lawrence Lynch property, we know that it's quite ripe. In fact, they've applied, and well, I'll say they didn't get the permit they were looking for, but this might add some benefit to the folks at Lawrence Lynch. This site on Blacksmith Shop Road is 65.92 acres of AGA zoning. Approximately 35 acres have already been previously disturbed. Parcel 220404 at 565 Blacksmith is a 95.49 acre parcel under public utilities. The owner is the town of Falmouth. There's approximately 17 acres previously disturbed. Parcel 16-1 on Blacksmith Road is 52.97 acres in LIC and PU zoning. The town of Falmouth owns this. 50 acres are previously disturbed, and this is actually the site where the current solar is on the landfill. And these smaller parcels here, 468 Thomas Landers Road, 14.6 acres in AGZ zoning, about 12.13 previously disturbed. 160203, also on Landers Road, is a 30.30 acre parcel owned by AGA with approximately 18.7% disturbed. Both of those lots are owned by Cape Cod Aggregate. And then I think these are the last groups in here. We've got an 11.4 acre parcel, 1.6 is disturbed. A 13.9 acre parcel, or 19.26 acre, 13 acres previously disturbed. 15.4, 10.6 acres previously disturbed, and 7.1 acres in AGA with 3.61 previously disturbed. The reason 7 acres is the smallest lot size in this bylaw is because using the existing lots, that's the smallest lot that's out there. I'm of the opinion that zoning works better if it goes on the whole parcel. You have zoning on some portion of the parcel. So that is the wrap on the large-scale solar PV, which would be in this corridor, and I view it as sort of a starting point for where we can do solar and put it in responsibly and put it in so it doesn't have those effects that people don't like to see. Nobody complains when a tree gets cut down to build a house. Well, maybe somebody does, but people don't complain when trees get cut down to make subdivisions, but people complain when trees get done to cut solar. It doesn't seem right. But we wanted to make sure we've got the best bylaw we can to support this need in an area that keep you know, the town looking like Falmouth. There's no aesthetics in solar. As I said, this bylaw does include the opportunities for storage as well. Recently, I went to the Cape Cod, Joint Base Cape Cod, and met with Major Doyle there to talk about their microgrid, because they have a microgrid and they have storage there. Those storage cells, the storage they use there are lead-acid batteries. They have, I'm going to forget the size of the array, but they basically have 2 40-foot sea containers chock full of lead-acid batteries. The principal medium for storage these days is lithium-ion batteries. So the storage component allows that. There is provision in the bylaw for training for emergency responders as well, because you know, a building full of lithium-ion batteries is not something our emergency responders are familiar with. So that would include some training for them as well. Happy to take any questions.
First gentleman on the right there.
Yeah,
Please step up and identify yourself.
Alessandro Bocconcelli, 64 Novska Road. I don't recall canyons cutting down any trees for the canopies.
We didn't say they did.
Well, but it seems like the point is we're gonna hide the solar panels and we put them there so we don't have to cut down any trees, but nobody cut down any trees to put up the solar panels.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Virginia, somebody behind you was up first. I did, in the back there, yes?
Dan Webb.
My name is Dan Webb. I live in Precinct 6. This article, I think, it encompasses a handful of very large lots. I think those are appropriate lots and have been chosen carefully, and they make sense. However, I think that the overlay district as a whole is too small and too restrictive. I can provide one specific example. Is there a laser pointer available?
You can use the mouse. The laser pointer won't work.
All right, let's see. Now, is that showing on the main screens, that arrow?
Yes.
All right, so this is just an arbitrary example, but that article that I'm pointed, that lot that was pointed to, that's in the Falmouth Technology Park. That is flat, cleared, disturbed. Sorry?
And wet. It's restricted by, the whole lot's totally restricted from wetlands. It's owned by the EDIC. I'm very familiar with it.
Okay, well, it may be wet, but in any case, it's an example of a lot.
Put solar over the water. We have, the town, we're not gonna touch the Conservation Commission setback for resources. And that's,
I'm not sure we're talking about the same lot. This lot has a big for sale sign on it. It's
I
on
was talking
Langdon.
the lot next to it. The one that one. I thought you were meaning that one.
Yeah, right there.
No, that one's fine, sorry.
On Langdon Burwell. It's flat, it's cleared, it's disturbed, it's industrial, it's adjacent to the capped landfill. It has 3-phase power on site, but you cannot do ground mount solar on that lot under this overlay. Now, that's just one example, and I have no idea if this owner ever has any intention to do solar. Same could be said for these other lots. In any case, that's one example of how I think the overlay district is unnecessarily restrictive. I think there are other areas that should be included, and when we get to Article 9 and Article 10, we can discuss those in more detail. I think the 100-foot setback is, there should be a setback. I think 100 feet is excessive. Also, I think there might be a misunderstanding about the significance of the power line easement. Those really high voltage distribution lines, only the most mammoth solar farm would ever connect directly to those lines, because you have to build a substation, probably cost $1 million to do an interconnection like that. The kind of solar farms that we're talking about here would almost certainly connect to the regular 13 kilovolt 3-phase lines that run all over the place, run all the way down Thomas Landers Road, run all through the tech park, run all over Falmouth. So just in case there's that misunderstanding is there, those really high voltage transmission lines are not probably going to be used to interconnect any of this stuff. And I will come up to make some related comments when we get to Article 9 and 10.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Virginia?
Virginia Valiello, Precinct 5, Town Meeting Member. I am very much in favor of solar arrays, and I think this is a very important conversation that this community is having about all aspects about that. On this particular article, solar-mounted arrays I don't have an issue with. It's the storage, because I think the area that's been defined is in the zone of contribution for Long Pond. And so you've got to think about what you're putting in storage there, what kind of equipment is there, any kinds of oils and so on. And you need an overlay of the zone of contribution to make sure that you aren't in conflict with that.
Thank you. Mr. Walker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Grant Walker. One question that I have is in the identification of this particular area in the, I think you call it the Blacksmith Shop Road corridor, am I correct in that area? In identifying that, have any other areas or parts of our town been considered as possibilities also? So that's a question that remains open in my mind. Secondly, I'd like to say that I found the presentation by Mr. Botts just now tremendously helpful, and I'm hoping that that is is that available on the website? What the lots are and so on?
It'll
All that
be in the
information in the
article.
presentation?
Yes, all the articles are on the website and they're published.
Well, not just the articles, but I mean the information that Mr. Bott had up on the screen. I don't think that's not all in the articles, I don't think, but I found that very helpful, but it went by so fast, I'm not that quick, I need to take a look at it.
Wasn't every time, wasn't every,
We can post it on the website.
Yeah.
It's not current because it's fresh off the press. It hasn't had it for a while.
Well, that looks
yes.
very helpful, I'd want to say that.
The answer is yes.
And I just wanted to point out, this was mentioned by Mr. Webb, the previous speaker, briefly, I think he alluded to this. But I noticed that the setback measurements or footage are much greater than the corresponding setbacks in the model guideline. I'm talking about the model as of right zoning bylaw allowing use of large-scale ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installations from the Department of Energy Resources, December 2014. Instead of 100 feet in the front yard, they have 10 feet. Instead of 35 feet on the side yard, they have 15. Instead of 35 feet in the rear yard, they have 25. And I think part of the presentation is to suggest that we want to keep Falmouth looking like Falmouth. So I'm assuming that was the part of the logic. But, well, who determines whether Falmouth looks like Falmouth, what Falmouth should look like? It seems to me a tremendous departure. It's 10 times the setback in the front yard, 2.5 times the setback in the side yard, and about twice that in the rear yard. So it's much larger than the state model. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My name is Brian McGrath. I'm a land abutter, Happy Hollow Road. I think these projects are great for the town. I have some concerns and some questions, though. You know, I love that leaf dump. I use it all the time. What's going to happen to that? If parcel PU, Public Utilities Parcel, I believe that includes the leaf dump. And where do we get to dump our leaves? I mean, that's a real valuable thing to homeowners. Offsets are great, but I don't know what happens with this. What's the definition of disturbed land? And I saw that there was 2 acres allowed per 7 acres of clearing trees. Is that 2 acres per these large parcels, or 2 acres for every 7 acres type calculation? Or is it just in these big parcels, 2 acres more can be cleared away? And in speaking with homeowners on our street, we'd like a bigger offset than 100 feet. And also, if there's wetlands on the parcels, they're not going to be touched? Or can they be re-engineered, or what?
Not our job. The conservation has setbacks, no structures. No one can touch it. There's a restriction for conservation, not touching that. You can't build, you can't do anything, you can't, to touch those lands would be conservation jurisdiction, not ours.
I see.
So that would stay the same as the answer.
Yeah, that's a good thing. We like hearing the coyotes back there and stuff. That's all I got. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I'm not against solar or any other, but this is my house right here.
Excuse me, sir. You first need to go up to the microphone and identify yourself, and you can use the pointer. You can use the mouse there to show where your house is, if you don't mind.
I'm not computer literate, but my name's Steve Good. I live on Capricorn Circle. And I'm not against solar arrays or any, I think it's clean energy, it's a beautiful thing. But that's not, from my backyard to Lawrence Lynch's property is not 100 feet. There's 20 feet between my property line and their property line. So if they're gonna put a solar array, and right now, Lawrence Lynch has not been a good neighbor to me because he does nothing about the kids out there with their dirt bikes. I could call the cops tell me they can't do nothing about it, they can't catch them. I can walk over and talk to them, so how can they tell me they can't be caught? And I can't watch a football game on a Sunday when they're out there. But if they're gonna have setbacks, and they're gonna tell me there's 100 feet setback, that wouldn't bother me, 100 feet. But right now, my property line to their property line is 20 feet.
When we calculated the 100-foot setback, we took into consideration a map that Mr. Bott showed earlier that showed the slope going down. So not only these things will be 100 feet away, but you won't be able to see them because they'll be 40.
Well, they're filling that all in. When I bought the house in 2006, you couldn't, when you walked out through the woods, there was a gully, a good-sized gully, but they've been filling that in for the last 3 years. So now it's almost level.
Okay.
When I walk out, I can almost walk right, almost out to the power lines now, because they've been filling it in for the last 2 or 3 years. Now, I don't know if anybody knew about them filling it in, but they started from over by Blacksmith Shop Road, and they've been constantly filling it in. Now, if they're doing that for the solar related, so they keep it up, I don't know, I'm just saying, if it's 100, as long as it's 100-foot setback and I don't lose my property line, because I don't want to walk out my backyard and see solar panels. I mean, I like solar panels, but I don't want to see and I like the coyotes and the deer and everything that run through there. Now, if they're going to do landscaping and make it so that the kids can't drive into my backyard with their dirt bikes to get around the solar arrays, then I'm all for it. But I would want a bigger setback because that's right out my backyard. Thank you.
So are you saying that 100-foot is too small? You want it more
Yes,
than 100?
more, it would have to be, for me, it would have to be 300 feet, because like I said, my property line to Lawrence Lynch's property line is 20 feet.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mary Newton Lima. I own one of the abutting properties on Happy Hollow, and I have a couple of questions. Is this touchscreen? Okay. Is there a way to go forward through the slides that you showed? Because I had a question on this particular parcel. Keep going. That one. Okay, so this is parcel 22. This is the one that abuts Happy Hollow Road. My question to you is, it's a 95-acre lot. 17 acres are previously disturbed, and that's kind of up in that top part. My question is, the area, like, below that and going towards Happy Hollow, will that be also available for development? Because if you walk out there, you can see it's wetlands, and I know you said it's the commission, it's not your job, but my question is, it's owned by the town of Falmouth, so is that designated wetlands by the town of Falmouth, and as such are protected by the commission? And the other question I have is, most of that is all wooded, but I don't know your definition of disturbed, because it probably was cleared at some point and grew back. So if it was disturbed 50 years ago, but it has not been disturbed in the last 20 years, does that count as disturbed? And can there be solar arrays all the way down? Because if you look at that first one, the first slide that you had up there, there were solar arrays, solar panels all the way down to the back of our yards. So those are my questions. I don't know if this is the format to answer my questions, but if you could, that'd be great.
Well, just from looking at
Why don't you have Tom?
Okay.
So, to answer a couple of questions, hopefully, the minimum lot size is 7 acres. And you can only clear 2 acres that have trees on it now under the proposed bylaw. So regarding whether and this does not require people to put solar on their property, it gives them an option. So if the town of Falmouth decided, well, we're done doing leaf dumps, we'll put solar on it, they could, but I don't know that that's in the cards for anybody. So this is an option, not a requirement. In order to create additional lots, and this is a little bit into the weeds, you have to create a subdivision. So if you have a 40-acre piece of property and you want to make 5 7-acre lots out of it, you have to come to the planning board with a subdivision plan to create a road and create new lots. And on each of those lots, you would have under this bylaw a maximum of 2 acres that you could clear. So 2 acres on a lot, 7 acres is a minimum size. Regarding this piece of property here, if the town was so inclined to do a subdivision on their property, I've never seen that before, but I've only been here since April, but I've been 20 years in Massachusetts, other places. Conceivably, but once again, the disturbed land is what you see that's already been mined on the north side of the property. And down here in the bottom corner, that, as you pointed out, is the wetlands, and wetlands are the Conservation Commission's jurisdiction, so you would have a setback from the wetlands. Conceivably, that 100-foot setback, if that wetland is as big as I think it is, it's more than 100 feet, the 100-foot setback on the rear would be moot because the wetlands would basically be your buffer from the back of the property and the size of the property. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, but can I ask a follow-up? Or am I taking up too much time? I guess my response to that then is this map needs to be drawn again, because that 100-foot setback is going straight through the wetlands, and that's not representative of what you said or what you said, respectfully. The other thing is, I understand what you said earlier about you think it's better to have zoning for the entire parcel instead of part of a parcel. But if you're only talking about those 17 acres up there, then I don't understand why you wouldn't say those 17 acres are available for solar power, if that's the only part that you're gonna do. And those are my comments.
Thank you.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, and I should have pointed out in the slide, you will see that there are a couple lines on here. The red line that you see, I shouldn't point with my finger, should I? So this red line you see right here, that is essentially the street and the zoning line. This black line right here, this is the outline of the parcel. This purple line, that's a 35-foot setback. So that shows what a 35-foot setback is. The green line next to that is a 100-foot setback. So this shows the potential setbacks on each of those pieces of property. What's 35 feet, what's 100 feet, so you have a better idea of what the developable portion of the site is.
Yes, sir?
Good evening, Chairman Fox, the board. My name is Zach Farkas from Borrego Solar, speaking on behalf of Chris Lynch, who couldn't be here today. First, I'd like to thank the board and thank Mr. Bott for all the work you guys have put into this bylaw. We wholeheartedly support it. I think originally we were trying to move at a faster pace. I think I would define this as more of a walk before we run. You guys have done a great job in defining appropriate places for solar that work for the community, that work for solar developers, and I thank you guys for all your effort. 2 points I'd like to make. One was identified by Mr. Bott in the slides, the bullet. One of the final bullets said Lawrence Lynch had a piece of property, it's a small parcel that was not included in the original overlay, so just like to formally support the inclusion of that parcel. It is located right here. It is disturbed, it's part of the existing gravel pit, and it's part of the existing utility corridor. The second recommendation or request that I'd like to make of the board is to consider the lot coverage ratios. I think as the bylaw is written, the underlying zoning lot coverage ratios would define lot coverage ratios for solar. A 20% lot coverage ratio for an agricultural parcel like the Lawrence Lynch parcel may not be detrimental, but for our specific parcel, but it could impact others. And I think if you guys are putting forth an overlay district, I think I'd like you to consider adding to the bylaw a lot coverage ratio that makes sense for solar, because the existing lot coverage ratios were written into the bylaw when solar wasn't considered a feasible development use. 20% coverage is quite conservative, and I think everything the board and Mr. Bott has presented has essentially dictated the willingness of the town to develop disturbed land, but I'd recommend the town optimizes the development of that disturbed land by allowing a developer to build within that center of the parcel.
I mean, your proposed project, what is the lot coverage ratio of what you're proposing right now?
So if lot coverage, as defined by you as the structure, basically the square footage
Yeah.
of the panels impacted, it's slightly below 20%.
So this would not impact you.
Not impacted us, I'm speaking generally. I think it may impact some of the smaller parcels. We're lucky that we have incredibly large setbacks to the northwest off Blacksmith Shop Road, about 200 feet of undeveloped woodland that would remain, obviously, to screen the site. And also to the far southeast is all woodland. So basically, we're only planning to use within the fence about 20 acres of the 75 acres. So that's about a third of it, 30%. And then just basically the row spacing brings us below 20. So I think we're fine, but I'd just like the board to consider for other parcels, for other usage. The landfill, for instance, the row spacing is a lot tighter on a landfill project as opposed to a typical ground mount. And just want to make that recommendation as you guys consider in the future meetings before town meeting. But thank you again for all your effort. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Attorney Kirk.
Over here first, and then Attorney Kirk. Yes, Mr. Webb. Is that you, Mr. Webb? Did you have your hand up?
I did not, actually.
I thought I saw a hand there.
That was Mr. Walker.
Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't tell. Pardon me. Attorney, would you go up? Yeah, Mr. Walker's had a couple of shots at this. You go first.
Well, I'd like to hear you.
Okay, then go ahead. Is this your third time on this one, Mr. Walker?
I think it'll be my second on this.
Okay, you can keep going.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Grant Walker. This Article 8, as I understand it, has two parts. One, the principle of an overlay district is kind of specified, and two, then that's applied in the second part to this particular area along the Blacksmith Shop corridor. So would it be correct for us to assume that if there are, in the future, other overlay districts, the same principles would apply and to those other areas?
That is the intent, to have a plan all set, so anybody that wants to do solar, we already have a set of guidelines ready to go, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. But that's why we call it an overlay district.
Perhaps that's to be understood. For me, I would find it very helpful in the article itself that be spelled out, that this is a principle that will, basically be applied in other overlay districts as they come up.
We will, but just so you know, the way we work it, we always first create a zoning district. For instance, when we did the light industrial C, we didn't specify where it was going. We had meetings and hearings, we create the district first. And then after the district's created, then we apply it, then we have a hearing and apply it to a certain land. So first we have a hearing about creating the district, and then another hearing about reapplying it. It's our practice on all zoning. So we will spell it out, but that's the way we do it.
But this one article combines both, am I understanding it correctly? So you're not separating it in this
We're
particular?
doing them both at the same time on this one.
Yeah. So, as long as it's spelled out what's coming, that'll be good. Thank you.
You in agreement, Tom, that's the procedure?
Yes, sir. You can blame the new guy for doing it wrong.
Right, I didn't want to say that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm here, my name is Edward Kirk. I'm an attorney, and I'm representing the Lawrence Lynch Chris Lynch, and also associated with Zach Farkas. I just wanted to make one comment about lot coverage. Chapter 48, Section 3 is sort of the guiding principle here that sort of hangs over everything, that says, with respect to solar, you may not prohibit it, but you may reasonably regulate. And the touchstone for reasonable regulation is whether it impacts public health, welfare, or safety. So I think Mr. Bott's done a superb job, a lot of initiative getting this thing up and running. I think the setbacks, 100 feet, are, as the other gentleman pointed out, more than what the model bylaw put out by the Commonwealth suggests. So I think the bylaw, through Mr. Bott's efforts, is doing good work to protect neighbors and allow the activity or the structures to take place basically unseen. But with respect to lot coverage, with a 100-foot setback outside, I have a concern that depending on how the building inspector may view what a structure is, that the project may be squeezed on the inside. And the Commonwealth has put out some regulations, and they've specifically addressed lot coverage. And they say, regardless of the definition, it is recommended that solar energy systems with grass or other pervious surface under them be exempt from lot coverage. And then the model put out by the Commonwealth goes on to say, suggest, as an example, the following language: solar energy systems shall not be included in calculations for lot coverage or impervious cover. On our particular project, it's excavated land, it's sand. So we wouldn't want to be sort of captured in a calculation of lot coverage, which is sort of contrary to the spirit and to the suggestion of the Commonwealth. So I just...
So are you suggesting that they should be allowed to build up to the 10-foot line and cover the entire parcel with these structures?
No, everything else would take place, but we wouldn't want to be limited to 20% based on the square footage, let's say, of the panels. We don't think that would be appropriate. That might be too much of a squeeze and an unreasonable regulation. So in other words, not to treat the glass panel as a structure and have the development of the site limited to, let's say in our case, 65 acres. 20%, probably 13 acres. I think, as Mr. Farkas pointed out, we're just under, but we don't want to get into a tug-of-war with the building department. And I think, as he has pointed out, with other smaller parcels, this would sort of could be an impediment to the development of solar on smaller lots. So
Do you have a number in mind of lot coverage you would recommend?
I would suggest you follow what the bylaw, what the model bylaw is, to exempt from structures, exempt the system as a whole from lot coverage. As long as you have pervious underneath, which this is. Thank you.
I do not see anybody else. Oh.
Hi, Mary Newton Lima again. Unlike many people in the audience, I was not organized enough to actually write down all of my questions, so I forgot a couple. First up, the 100-foot setback, I think is really good. I did not do that. Okay. The other thing, I'm just looking at the maps. In all of the layover, or I'm sorry, what was overlay? Sorry. There are very few residential homes that abut most of these areas. And I would ask the zoning board to take a little more consideration of those residential properties and nudge it up a little bit. For example, in this area, I mean, obviously, I have a vested interest in this because we own a home here. But if you even just kind of knocked that up even near the conservation areas, then all of the problems for Happy Hollow is pretty much gonna go away. So I would like you to just keep that in mind. And I'm not saying, you know, don't put anything on there. I think that it's a great, vast, open lot, and a great thing to do would be on solar panels. But I understand, as you said, aesthetics is not a requirement, I guess, by the state when you're putting in solar panels. Am I getting that right? Okay. I worked in county government in Florida, and usually the county could be more restrictive than the state. And so I would ask the town to consider the aesthetics of the residential homes, and not only in this area, but in the other gentleman that spoke, because it would be a shame to have a lot of opposition on such a vast area. I think that's it, but my phone just went off, so if you'll give me 1 second. Yeah, that was it. Thank you.
We'll have plenty to say when we discuss it, but tonight we're here just to listen, to make sure everyone was heard. Has everyone been heard on this issue?
Okay, then I will move that we close Article 8 and take it under advisement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay,
And then,
you wanna read that?
yeah, we have 2 petitioners' articles that are on solar. And so I am going to ask the board to consider taking Articles 9 and 10 out of order at this time. So I move that we take Articles 9 and 10, petitioners' articles, out of order, so that they are grouped with what we've already been discussing with solar.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we'll move to Article 9.
Article 9 is on petition of Ronald D. Swag.
If he's here.
Is he here?
Mr. Webb said he's here for him.
Okay.
We would rezone anything in Industrial Park if they want to go to light industrial C in a second, wouldn't we? That's what we could rezone light industrial A or B to see if they wanted it.
Dan Webb again, Precinct 6. Ronald Zweig, who was the petitioner for Article 9, was not able to come tonight, and he asked me to present the article on his behalf. So I have his comments here, which I'll read and paraphrase. Thank you for the opportunity to present the rationale for the fall 2018 town meeting warrant article number 9 to amend Town Code Chapter 240 concerning the installation of photovoltaic arrays in light industrial A, B, and C districts. In your deliberations, please bear in mind Massachusetts law, Chapter 40A, Section 3 states, and this has been referred to before this evening, no zoning ordinance or bylaw shall prohibit or unreasonably regulate the installation of solar energy systems or the building of structures that facilitate the collection of solar energy, except where necessary to protect the public health, safety, or welfare. In a nutshell, what Article 9 would do is allow ground-mounted solar arrays as a primary or accessory use in the light industrial A and light industrial B districts, as they are already allowed in light industrial C. It would also, so they are already allowed as a primary use in light industrial C, this article would do the same thing for the A and B districts and also allow it as a accessory use in C. The rationale behind this is that allowing ground mount solar in industrial districts seems inherently reasonable. The total acreage of all of Falmouth's industrial districts, A, B, and C combined, makes up 1.6% of the town's area. That's the area that's been set aside for industrial use. This article says it inherently makes sense to allow ground mount solar in that area. I seek your support of this article to revise Chapter 240 for the installation of ground-mounted photovoltaic arrays in light industrial A, B, and C districts. Ron also asked me to mention that he plans to introduce an amendment at town meeting that would expand this to include both solar hot water as well as photovoltaic. Apparently I think most of what's happening today is photovoltaic, but apparently there is some future possibility of hot water as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Walker? I was kidding. You raise your hand every time. Do you have something to say? I'm sorry.
Nothing on this one.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. That was a joke.
So if I may, for your information, anticipating this article, knowing it was coming, there are 5 slides that show the various areas of town where LIA, LIC, and LIB are at. So as we scroll through,
I think it's important because there's some really issues with what we've done with our industrial land, and I don't think it works as it's proposed, but it'll become self-evident when we see where the other industrial properties are and what's on them.
So what I did is I just went through our GIS and basically made pictures of everywhere where we have LIA and LIC. So here in the, sort of in the industrial park area, those are pretty much expected to see there, but as we get further south into town, we've got a little LIA off of T-Ticket Highway here. More in town, top right of the screen, I guess I can use this mouse thing here, off of East Falmouth Highway, closer into town. South of Gurus Pond, we have some more LIA, LIB, and LIC. And then as we get further into town, this is right off of Route 28, just off, this is actually north by Nathan Ellis Highway. And then as we get deep into town, you see that we have some LIA here on the left, and north of that, near Jones Pond. And some of these areas are, a little closer into town, smaller sites. It would be perhaps, harder pressed to locate a solar array that would provide any return for an investor. So, because I know sometimes these questions come up, where are these properties that are at? We produce maps so folks would have an idea where those particular districts are at.
Can you zoom on this section? There's a big piece of light industrial off of Palmer Avenue and near Terhune Drive with Carlson Lane and a bunch of residential developments that are in the industrial park.
Is that right here by Skating Lane? Or Carlson Lane, right here at the top left? That's the LIA that you're speaking
Yeah, there it is, that whole strip up there. That's all developed with houses. So I don't know if that works or not.
Well, just to keep in mind, zoning is an option, not a requirement.
Right. We'll go into it in discussion later. I have some things to say, but I'll hold off until we finish the hearing. Do you have something, Pat? Not now.
Not now.
Yeah, we all have things to say, but we'll wait till you all get to speak first. Yes, Mr. Walker. I knew you had something.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Grant Walker. Well, maybe I can point to it with
Try
this.
the mouse. You're gonna have
Yeah,
to
let
get
me
used
try
to
that.
this. You come to every one of our meetings. You better get good at this.
Well, you can keep me coming back if you try. This area right here is the one you were just referring to?
Yes.
And it's zoned industrial. Is there any industrial use there already, or
Very little.
but some?
Our zoning allows by special permit up to 6 to 8 residential units in industrial zone areas A and B, not C. And that is why we created light industrial C, to avoid this conflict of residential and solar. And that's why our bylaw is worded this way, and that's something we'll be discussing. There's,
So-
I don't know, a couple hundred homes in there. I live on Palmer Avenue, Locust Street, back half of my lot, light industrial.
Yeah.
It's downtown.
So residences are allowed and
By
do,
special permit.
and do already exist
And they
in
already
some of
exist.
these light industrial districts.
The reason why we had to create light industrial C is because previously, through special permit, a large majority of our industrial land was developed as residential housing. So in response to many contractors coming to us 4 or 5 years ago, pleading for relief from encroachment of housing on industrial land, we created light industrial C, and therefore we put it in no housing in light industrial C, so that we could rezone areas light industrial C and stop the housing from coming into it. This bylaw would merge them both together and put housing and solar in the exact same lot.
Not in the same lot, but in the same
Same parcel.
parcel or zoning area, or is that, am I using the right terminology, or?
Parcel is correct.
Okay, parcel, thank you. So solar could be near people's houses, solar arrays. Is that the concern?
Yes.
And I guess I'm concluding that that is regarded as a negative thing.
Depends on the application.
So there could be a solar project that wouldn't be adversely impacting.
Well, not with 100-foot setbacks as we're proposing here, so our bylaw resolves this issue.
Are 100-foot setbacks also proposed for these
No?
light industrial zones?
Well, that's right, if they put the overlay district. This bylaw has no setbacks at all, correct? It's just regular setbacks. I'm sorry, I was thinking of the previous bylaw. Our overlay district has setbacks. I have not heard anything mentioned in setbacks here. Mr. Webb, you'd like to get back up? Please do.
Thank you. So I'd like to make a comment as myself, not as my alter ego, Ron Zweig. Dan Webb again. It sounds to me like there is a pre-existing and long-standing problem with a mixture of residential and industrial districts in certain areas. That, I know nothing about that, but it sounds to me like that is a pre-existing problem that's unrelated to solar. Maybe solar would exacerbate that problem, but this seems like an underlying problem, not a solar problem to me. Someone could come in with who knows what industrial application in these zones. Maybe solar would be preferable to many industrial applications that would be allowed in these areas because
Mr.
it's
Webb?
silent.
The problem that you refer to is not exactly, I think, as you are imagining it. We had LIA and LIB. Housing was allowed, multifamily housing was allowed in those two districts. And what happened is that was considered the highest and best use for that zoning. So we lost our industrial parcels because they were taken over by housing. It isn't that there was anything wrong with it, that's the way the zoning was. And that is why we created LIC, because, as Jim pointed out, contractors around here were going off Cape to other towns because we couldn't offer them any place to put their equipment, to do their business, because it had all been taken over by housing. So that was the conflict.
As a practical matter, I think it's very unlikely that you would find solar developers trying to shoehorn solar farms into tight residential areas.
We
It
understand,
seems
but
like an unlikely scenario.
your proposed bylaw doesn't address that.
Well, they are areas that have been designated as industrial by the town. Thank you.
Should I close the hearing now? Because I
Any-
see
anyone
no one
I
else.
was just gonna ask, anyone else? Seeing none?
Then I move that we close the hearing on Article 9 and take it under advisement.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. And we move on to 10.
Okay, Article 10. Go ahead.
Zach Farkas again, Borrego Solar, speaking on behalf of Lawrence Lynch Corporation. This is the time in the meeting where I take my hat off and offer my apology to the planning board. This article was submitted without the knowledge that the planning board would be putting forth its own amendment. As I said earlier in the public comment period, we wholeheartedly support the zoning overlay district amendment, and it's our intention that if the zoning overlay district amendment is passed, we will withdraw this from the town meeting. With that said, a brief overview. It was our intent here, as many of you know, we've been advocating for our project for almost 18 months now, and we were planning to come back to town meeting this fall. Similar to Mr. Zweig's article, we were looking to expand the allowable use for solar from light industrial C to include A, B, and agricultural A. Unlike the previous article, we placed a size restriction, basically an acreage floor on the parcel of 20 acres. Our thought was to use that acreage floor to eliminate any type of conflict that we were just discussing in the previous article. That 20-acre placeholder, if you will, was meant to be brought in front of the board to ask for your direction on what an appropriate parcel limit size would be. But as I said, we are in support of the zoning overlay district and appreciate the efforts that have gone on for the previous article.
Thank you.
There are probably no comments, but you should ask for them.
Anyone else before I close the public comment part? Yes, Mr. Webb.
Dan Webb again. I think that Article 10 is well-intentioned. My comment might be moot if it's withdrawn. I think it's just worthy of note that both Articles 9 and 10 were independently expanding solar into the industrial districts. I think there's a technical glitch in Article 10. The 20-acre limit is moot in light industrial A and light industrial B, since there's not a single lot in A or B that would meet that 20-acre threshold. They don't exist. But I think there's a broader point that the overlay district can and should be expanded as indicated in Articles both 9 and 10 into industrial A, B, and maybe some of the larger agricultural lots. Thank you.
So that comment really should have been on the last article. You would like to expand the scope of the last article.
Well, no, that comment is on Article 10 because I'm discussing the commonality between 10 and 9, since both of them address light industrial.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? I think we've heard everybody.
Then I move that we close the hearing on Article 10 and take it under advisement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Now I move that we go back to the regular order that we had and start up with Article 11. I moved it, we have to take a vote, I'm
Yeah,
moving
sorry.
back.
We need a second. All in favor?
Aye. We're sleeping to
Yeah.
first.
We usually are finished by this time.
I know.
Alrighty, Article 11 11, moratorium on solar energy systems. This article has sparked a lot of conversations. Moratorium on permits for solar. This bylaw was proposed in the event that the above articles regarding solar weren't voted by town meeting in order to have more time to develop new regulations on solar. Essentially, this moratorium by language is the same language as in the current zoning bylaw. Regarding wind, I simply replaced wind with solar and gave it a moratorium date of a year out. Moratoriums are temporary. They are not permanent. They have a shelf life. And typically a moratorium would be about a year, some more, but typically you would have a moratorium for about a year. But as I said before, this Article 11 was proposed in the event that the previous zoning articles for solar weren't adopted, to basically put a stop, a pause on solar development until the town could develop larger regulations. I'd like to think that, well, I won't make my opinion, but I think we've got a lot to work with.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Kirsten Moritz, and I'm in Precinct 2. And perhaps the planner has clarified this a little bit for me, but I found this moratorium article entirely confusing and unnecessary. Why? Your article on the overlay, which is very interesting, has a purpose which you state, which is to promote creation of large ground-mounted solar. But then, you've got a moratorium article, which would not promote, but would discourage these structures and anyone thinking about putting up such a structure. So if I found that confusing, perhaps we got a somewhat of an explanation here, but your general public is going to be very confused. In addition, as I know you guys know, the Mass Law, Chapter 40A, Section 3, prohibits unreasonable regulating of installations except if necessary to protect public health, safety, and welfare. So that is another confusing thing to me, because where is the danger to public health, safety, and welfare in such a solar array? In fact, it's really the opposite. Solar, because it uses renewable energy, really promotes health and safety for the public and the public welfare. So you've got things opposite in my view. What I suggest to you is that you get rid of what I would say is an unreasonable regulation and heavy-handed moratorium. It should be struck down. It shouldn't even be on the warrant. You could hopefully take it off. And you're proposing something that, because of mass law, the Attorney General might get involved and say, what is this? Because it feels to me like that is an unreasonable regulation and the opposite of what is intended with a solar array, which is to promote human health and safety. So my suggestion is strike that off the warrant, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up front here first, this woman here.
Rosemary Drager Carey from Precinct 5. I agree with Kristen. I emphatically urge the planning board to strike this article altogether. Moratorium on solar energy would be just disastrous for solar in Falmouth. While on face value, it sounds reasonable to take time out and study the impacts of sites to get it right, which I'm all for. A one-year moratorium, given the enormity of the climate crisis that we face right now, is kind of like rearranging the deck chairs. We should not be putting a stop to solar for any reason. We can get this right with the rules that we have and the bylaws with amendments, as we saw many of the good suggestions here tonight. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes?
Hi, Megan O'Reilly, Precinct 3. This might be really clear to y'all, but I had a couple of my friends and coworkers read the article, and they weren't sure if it included residential solar arrays. Would this moratorium only include ground mount? Like, you would still be able to put it on your roof?
The planning board does not do anything with residential.
Okay, sorry, so I think there might be some, just so y'all know. I mean, if you decide to keep this a town meeting, there is some confusion that people think it includes residential roof.
But no residential property, in fact, ever comes to the
That's
planning board.
fine, I understand the planning board, but I think when people, the public, pulling back, get confused between what is under zoning purview, what's under planning purview. I mean, I just think it's important to be really clear. And then just from like a broader sense, I'm really against a moratorium. It's 2018. We need to be doing more to actively increase the public's access to renewable energy and not actively restricting it, like, at all. It's my strong opinion. Like, come on, we can make Falmouth better by making it more energy efficient. We could go and be 100% renewable by being more forward, progressive thinking in a thoughtful way. Thank you.
Mr. Webb, and then Mr. Walker.
Dan Webb, yet again. Maybe I'm missing something, but it seems to me this says very explicitly, no building permit shall issue. I don't see how residential is exempted here. How is it exempted? It seems to me that the building department could simply not issue a permit for even the tiniest residential array if this were to pass. Am I missing something?
Solar array, second line.
What?
Maybe it should be large-scale solar array in the second line. That's what the
Well, the intent, you might have a point there. We might need to modify that because we don't get involved. The planning board doesn't do anything with residential.
But this law doesn't say that.
You're right.
point.
You're right.
I think that if, I'm no attorney, but I think if this passed, you would have a year-long ban on even the tiniest
That
residential
was
array.
not the intent, so we'll have to look into that. Thank you very much.
I'd also just like to support what's already been said. I think the whole concept of the moratorium, I think, would constitute unreasonable regulation per Chapter 40, Section 3. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Walker.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Grant Walker, 71 Philadelphia Street. I concur with the previous three speakers totally. And I would like to add that including this in the town meeting creates a great deal of unpredictability, and it puts people in the position of saying, well, if we don't give them A and B, we're gonna have to take C. You know, it puts us in a very, very bad place, I think, to have that kind of choice. It's not a good choice, as has been said, not for renewable energy and not for solar. Either A, B, or you gotta take C. And at a town meeting, believe me, I know this personally, anything can happen. So you put this in there, boom, people don't, you know, there's gonna be a lot of people, my backyard, my front yard, my side yard, my view, this, that, don't go for this, don't go for that. Boom, let's just put a moratorium on the whole thing. And theoretically, it's 1 year. Theoretically, moratoriums are not supposed to last. But how long has the moratorium on wind energy lasted in effect in this town? What kind of chilling effect did that moratorium have? And that's what I fear, that this would have a very chilling effect on the development of solar.
Thank you. Yes, sir?
Thank you, Planning Board members and Chairman Fox again for the opportunity to speak with you today. I'm Michael Stone, Falmouth resident and taxpayer. I've had a small business here in Falmouth, Suntility Electric LLC, for the past 5 years managing currently operating commercial and utility scale solar projects. Solar projects I manage are primarily based in Massachusetts and Vermont, and clients range from Fortune 500 energy companies to local nonprofits. An important note, considering all the articles, my company is not working on any solar projects in development in Falmouth. That is simply not the company's focus. I grew up in Falmouth. I have a strong understanding of the character and the very roots of this town. I'm speaking to you today because I simply care about clean energy progress and care about helping to advance the many economic and health benefits that solar power offers. Falmouth has a strong history of advancing solar energy. As I discussed, there's over 770 solar projects in Falmouth today. These are real people, obviously, that have these projects. 90% of these are residential solar arrays, providing direct benefits to the citizens of this town. These are your neighbors looking to do the right thing, saving energy, saving money, creating jobs, and helping the environment. Every 2.5 days, a new solar project is installed in Falmouth. Citizens of Falmouth are taking positive action to address issues such as the environment, energy security. We live on a peninsula, after all, and health. So my testimony today to you is specifically with regards to this article proposed for town meeting. Was the article intended to ban all permits for solar or just ground-mounted solar arrays? A plain reading of the article, as many have discussed, indicates that it would completely halt all new solar arrays in the town, 99% of which have historically been non-canopy, non-ground mount for up to an entire year. I understand there have been concerns with canopy solar arrays recently. However, a moratorium potentially on all solar projects would send a negative message about our town and stop an estimated 150 solar projects. How would that be a good thing? Simply put, Article 11 seems like a case of letting the perfect be the enemy of the good. Solar is a significant net benefit to this town and is a valuable part of a diversified local economy. Solar has brought over $40 million worth of investment to Falmouth, employed local skilled professionals, engineers, electricians, and laborers. Solar raises property values as well, according to the U.S. Department of Energy, as proven by multiple studies. For example, an average size solar array increases a home's value by $15,000. So it makes these homes more valuable to prospective buyers. So I truly appreciate your time today in service to this committee and the town. My humble recommendation to you is to at least clarify the article as written so that town meeting members know what they are voting on. Or a better, cleaner solution, simply remove the article entirely so that harm isn't caused to Falmouth homeowners and small businesses looking to do the right thing by going solar. Just to add as well, I think the confusion stems from, whether it applies to residential or ground mount. It says, to the contrary notwithstanding, no building permit or special permit for the construction of a solar arrays as defined shall issue until November 30th, 2019. Now you could say, well, a solar arrays as defined, but a solar arrays is not, well, it's not grammatically correct, but it's not actually a definition in the zoning bylaws anyways. So it seems like this could apply to any permit effectively. So you'd have potentially 150 people coming before the building department looking for permits that are wondering why they can't build their projects for potentially an entire year. I think that's unreasonable.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Edward Kirk, on behalf of the Lawrence Lynch Corporation. I mentioned earlier, General Laws, Chapter 40A, Section 3, that's sort of the overriding statutory structure under which these solar bylaws must be viewed. The statute states, "No zoning ordinance or bylaw shall prohibit or unreasonably regulate the installation of solar energy systems, the building of structures that facilitate the collection of solar energy, except where necessary to protect the public health, safety, or welfare." The terms regulate, unreasonably regulate, and except where necessary to protect public health, safety, and welfare is its own phrase. The key word in this statute is prohibit. And a moratorium, there's no other way to read this but to say this would prohibit any of this activity for a year. And the statute doesn't say temporarily or for more than a year or anything like that. So I think this is directly in conflict with the general laws of the Commonwealth. And I do think the Attorney General at some point would have to say it's not a valid exercise of your zoning authority. So I would sort of join the chorus here that suggests this would be better left on the sideline.
Thank you. Is there anything new? We've heard the same point 4 or 5 times. Is there somebody have a new point that they would like to bring up? Something new, please? Okay, you're already there. Go ahead. Sorry. I thought you were going out the door. I didn't realize you were.
No, not running away yet. Thank you for your patience. Just practically, the issue I have with the moratorium first is that there are a number of solar amendments, warrant articles that we've discussed. I'm worried about confusing the message at town meeting, especially with articles promoting and at the same time prohibiting solar. Second, I may be thinking selfishly here, but as a person who's tried to develop a project in Falmouth for quite some time, I would argue that there is a de facto moratorium on solar because of the current bylaw. And so if the proposed new bylaws do not pass, I think this is essentially unnecessary because solar can't move forward as the bylaws are written today. So I'd ask the board to remove this from the town meeting and further reduce the potential confusion as we come up to the meeting in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have someone else there? Yes, sir?
I'm Dave Jewett, 133 Adamancet, East Falmouth. I have been struck by the feeling of restriction all through the evening. It seems to me that there is a reasonable case to be made that there is an energy crisis or climate change. It may be that this board needs to meet with the Energy Committee just to get up to speed. We're talking about putting a moratorium on something which is a major thrust for trying to improve our situation. I don't understand how you can move forward with this. I would like to propose that you come up with 4 different ways in which you can expedite and increase the ability to make solar possible in the town rather than stopping it.
Thank you. Someone else, anything new?
I move that we take Article 11 under, close the hearing for Article 11 and take it under advisement.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we've been jumping around.
13. We're on 13, dimensional regulations.
13. Mr. Bott.
Is it okay if I take this one down? Just checking with the crowd. Article 13, dimensional regulations shed. This, once again, comes from a meeting we had with the building commissioner, Rod Palmer, regarding sheds, Amendment 2, amending Section 24068 setbacks minimum from side and rear setbacks by adding a subsection 1. For residential structures and appurtenant accessory structures in excess of 100 square feet except piers, floats, docks, and bulkheads, the minimum setback in all districts shall be 10 feet. The new language added would be a shed 100 square feet or less shall be at least 3 feet from the side or property, rear property lines. This is the practice that is currently in the building department. There's a brochure that talks about where you have to locate a shed. If it's under 100 square feet, it has to be at least 3 foot away from the from the side and rear setback lines, rear property lines. The building commissioner asked for some clarification on that, so he would be able to deal with any potential appeals of his determination that a shed under 100 square foot has to be at least 3 foot from the side and rear property lines. So it's basically codifying what they're already doing in the building department. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, I move that we close the hearing on Article 13 and take it under advisement.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Where are we now? We've been jumping around so
Article
much.
14.
14.
14.
Accessory housing.
Oh, you're up.
Oh, God.
We should have had you go first.
I know, this is my bedtime. Yes, it is. Okay. Article 14 came about, you probably recall that the accessory housing bylaw hasn't been in effect as it is currently for more than, about a year and a half. But when there was a joint meeting with the selectmen, with a number of boards and committees, it became obvious that a lot of people weren't on the same page. We weren't clear in our meaning insofar as the bylaw went. And so we sought to clarify the meanings. What you see here in bold print are the things that were not understandable to people or might present unreal expectations to applicants. The first thing under that is, you'll see that the lettering is not A, B, C, D. These are the ones that were changed. Under requirements, the reason for adding the lot size shall be no less than 7,500 square feet is that that could set up unreal expectations for people who had 3,000 or 4,000 square foot lots, septic system, they couldn't possibly do it. For other reasons as well. Just because we put a minimum lot size of 7,500 square feet does not necessarily mean that they could do it, because so much depends upon the lot configuration and the placement of the house. So, wanted to make that. Now, how does one measure the percentage or the square feet that's allowed? Well, first of all, you've got a cap of 800 square feet, but how do you get 40%? There were 3 that I know of, different ways of measuring the current house to determine, well, what can you have? And it appeared without question that if you measure the exterior side of the outside wall, this is without question. Anybody can take a tape measure and do it. So now you've got a secure thing, because people were measuring the insides of rooms, and they were throwing out a bathroom because you didn't live in a bathroom, and things like this. So if you measure the exterior side of the outside wall, that's not questionable. We also were getting a possibility of the accessory exceeding the footprint of the house. That makes it look like you've got 2 separate houses, that one is not an accessory, they're actually separated. And actually, the accessory could look like the main house if the footprint were larger than the main house. So this is how that one came about, F. The question came out, well, what about all these others that may have more than 4 bedrooms? How are you gonna handle them? You're not gonna tell them to take bedrooms away, so that allows to keep the bedrooms that you have. You can't add to them, but you can keep the number of bedrooms that you have. Tom, how do you get the thing to flip to the next one?
You're there.
You do it, right? Okay, thank you. So we go over to the Coastal Pond Overlay District. That raised questions with how you treat the sewage. This is a Board of Health issue, but we felt it needed, and we being this group of people, the temporary working group, felt that it needed some further definition so there would not be the questions that there might be. If you want to increase the number of bedrooms beyond the density outlined in the prior one, you can do so only provided that both the principal dwelling and accessory apartment are connected to the municipal sewer system. But then you've also got those that are connected to the municipal sewer system that might be in some way restrained. So that's why, and only to the extent allowed within the applicable sewer district bylaw or regulation. Or you could put on an on-site septic system with enhanced nitrogen removal approved by the Board of Health. That's an expensive proposition. So with those two things, you could increase. So we go to the next one. Design standards. We didn't even decide with the temporary working group to our satisfaction how this one should be. But we did decide, first of all, that you didn't want to limit what might be converted to a barn or a garage. That would just be too restrictive. What if you had a carriage house? So we changed it to as a detached accessory structure. Shall be that of a structure incidental to a single family. It's gotta fit the neighborhood. That's in the eyes of the beholder. That's still a little bit loose. One thing we did absolutely want to state, though, is that parking for the accessory apartment shall be provided on site. We knew that's what we always wanted, but we hadn't stated it. So you could have street parking, you could have overloading of the lot. We knew that the parking should be screened or however the neighborhood parks, so that it didn't stick out like a sore thumb. So we were still, as I said, how do you determine what fits in the neighborhood? Charlotte, who's not here this evening, came up with something. Now, if you put the phrase that she had in, it really defines it. It shall be, rather than a single-family residence compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. What's compatible with? Okay. She suggested that you should put in, shall be that of a single-family residence consistent in exterior character if within the principal residence, and then we have a second one, that if it's a separate building, and in the same character or period of architecture as the primary residence, if separate from the primary residence. So that seems better to define what we were looking for. So I hope that town meeting will see fit to putting these changes in. It took a lot of work to get to this point where we felt that it was better defined to make accessory apartments really good. And I'd be happy to take any questions if you have any.
Tom?
Tom Bunker, Precinct 2. If you wanted, I could get more nitpicky about how you would measure floor area, talk about the measuring along the exterior of the building. But when you're calculating 40%, I assume this is 40% of the total floor area of the principal structure?
Correct.
So how do you measure the floor area of a 1.5-story building where there's no good exterior wall to measure to? That's one question. And maybe you might have to measure the inside and add, 4 inches for the thickness of a typical stud wall. But, because it'd be under the roof, part of that half-story might be under the roof, so there's no exterior wall you can measure to.
Would a half-story, wouldn't you use 50%? Or what method do you use?
Well, we haven't done these calculations, but I'm just saying, it's simple to measure the exterior wall at the ground floor, but on, say, a cape, the floor does not might not take up the entire second story. And so, and the second story isn't always half of the first story. Might be 1/3, 2/3. Just something you may want to clarify. Also, when measuring the 800 square feet, when that apartment is in the same structure, you have a partition wall between the principal dwelling and the accessory apartment. Who gets the thickness of the wall, or do you measure down the middle of that wall?
Down the middle.
You know, okay, that's not, it's not up there, but it just,
So we have two areas to clarify how we do the second and third stories if necessary.
if you have to
2.5
measure.
story zoning, we have the possibility of having third story.
Third, yeah,
The
but
assessors have a formula for that, that's what I recommended, but the.
I'm just saying it's not
the
as
group
simple
did-
as.
The group didn't want to use the assessor's code. But
Mhm.
they have formulas for that, and we might have to do that on the second and third floors. to
Yeah, I
find
think
something.
you could take a drawing.
They have a
from-
formula that they base on it. For gambrels, they have 90%, for colonial, it's 100%, and for some capes, it's like 75. There's it's an a code.
However, if there's something like that, or just have a
We're gonna need
drawing of
something
it,
for the second and third floor.
that's all.
And you may have to measure from the inside, but not excluding any rooms like hallways and, yeah, because that's what was going on.
Mhm.
So.
Thanks. Well, my comment follows up on the concern about calculation of the square footage. Especially in apartments that would be on a second or third floor, you have sloping roofs and knee walls. And for calculating the size of rooms under the building code, I believe you only count the area that has at least, and I could be wrong on this, but I think it's 5 feet of headroom. And I don't think you should be counting portions of rooms that don't count for that reason under the building code. In addition, for second floor apartments, you may have a set of stairs, and in fact, you may need 2 to comply with fire codes. A set of stairs that go up to doors that go into the apartment. And to include those sets of stairs as part of the apartment, and to take that out of the 800 square feet, reduces the size of what's already pretty small living space excessively. So I really would want you to think more about limiting the size of the apartments to 800 square feet with the definition that's been proposed. It's also a problem in those buildings, accessory buildings, where the apartment is only a portion of the space. You shouldn't have to measure to the exterior walls for apartments that don't include the whole space. So I think there are a bunch of problems. 800 feet is already very small. You have situations where we're especially concerned about being able to use existing buildings above garages, for instance, for accessory structure. And some of those buildings just don't lay out to be exactly 800 feet, and I think there should be more flexibility. But that's a bigger problem and a different problem than just the definition of the square footage. And I'm not expecting that the planning board would solve the problem I just mentioned, although it's been mentioned. I've raised it before. I think there should be more flexibility than this arbitrary 800 square feet for existing buildings. But at least I'd like you to not make the problem worse with that definition. Thanks.
I think I should make a comment also in regard to this because of what Bob brought up about 800 square feet is pretty small. Yes, it's supposed to be small. We're hoping that when you do an accessory apartment, it will also be affordable. If you start being really flexible and saying, well, we can't rightly configure this, it's gotta be 900 square feet. They get bigger and bigger if you don't put the limit and say no more than 800 square feet, and this is how it's going to be measured, and hope that you get some that are smaller that really are affordable. So that was also much part of the discussion that we did.
Mr. Walker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is this. In the coastal overlay district or otherwise, if a house is already connected to the town's sewer system, but the lot is less than 7,500 feet, is that property eligible for an accessory apartment?
No.
Limited at 7,500 square feet.
It is under the existing bylaw. This group has proposed this change. This group was made up of, Pat, how many people sat up?
There were, I think, 7 different groups, but
Representing all different boards, working for a whole year, making these recommendations to modify our existing bylaw.
it was the zoning board of appeals, the board of health, oh my, I'm
Assistant
sorry.
Town Manager, Building Commissioner, Town Planner,
Thank you, Tom.
Representative of the Water Quality Committee.
As I said, it's kind of past my bedtime. My brain starts to fog a little bit.
Yes,
I
Mr.
appreciate
Walker,
your
please
help.
come up.
Thank you. I'm sorry to come up again like this, but I don't actually know how many square feet my lot is exactly right now, but I doubt that it's 7,500 square feet. I live in the Mara Vista Peninsula, and I doubt that there's probably a couple, but there's not many lots there that are more than 7,500 square feet, I don't think. Do you think I'm wrong in that?
We did have that looked at, and there are considerable.
There are a number of
Yeah.
them?
Mhm.
Well, I'll have to check our lot, because if not, it seems like kind of restrictive to me. But anyway, thank you, I'll check it out.
Thank you. Anyone else? No one else?
Pat, go ahead.
Yeah.
Your recommendation.
What?
Close the hearing.
Yeah, do you want me to close it? Okay.
Wait, you first-
I move that we close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Second.
I was doing it.
All
You
in
should've-
favor? Aye.
Aye.
Oh, you have to excuse us. We're,
Getting
okay, onward. Next, What's
Article 15.
15.
Kevin
27.
Clower.
Mr. Clower.
This isn't Bed Martha?
Excuse me?
Is this Bed Martha now?
No, not yet.
Not yet? I want to take a break.
Oh, Paul wants to
Paul,
take
we
a
have a
break.
request for a recess.
No, after the,
After this, okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Is this you? Okay. Right, so, I don't have them in front of me, is 15 accessory in GR? Okay, so if I can offer, Mr. because sometimes people ask the question, well, where are these places? Much like with the LI districts, I went through and identified where GR residence districts are in the town, so there's 5 slides here that shows where GR is at, if you want to use it for your purposes of your discussion.
But that was brought up at last meeting, that people didn't know where it was, and the next time they told us we should bring that slide.
Thank you. Of course, I'm Bob Ament, an attorney. Kevin Clower filed this at my suggestion, and it is a bylaw bylaw change, a proposal that should be pretty familiar with the planning board. When the accessory apartment bylaw was adopted 2 years ago, the general residence district was excluded. It may have been because nobody thought it was necessary in the general residence district, because you can already have a duplex by right. And you can have 3 dwelling units by right, as long as one is affordable, as a multifamily use. Multifamily use means you could have those 3 units, 3 dwelling units, in 3 separate dwellings on the lot. So by right, you can have 3 separate dwellings. By right, you can have a duplex. But what the bylaw does not provide for is to have 2 separate dwelling units in separate buildings. So once again, you can have 3 single-family units because that constitutes multifamily housing. The bylaw allows a duplex, a single dwelling. The bylaw does not allow 2 single-family residences. That makes no sense. I'm not asking the planning board, or won't be asking the town meeting, to change the bylaw to allow 2 single-family residences, except if one is an accessory apartment. All this bylaw does is correct the oversight, the mistake of 2 years ago, which the planning board acknowledged was a mistake last year when it sponsored this article. And the chairman spoke at the town meeting and said it was simply to cure a mistake, to allow an accessory apartment in a detached dwelling in the general residence district. Now, the general residence district is a buffer area between business zoned and residential zones. It's a relatively small area of town. There's this tiny bit. I haven't done this before here, so we'll see if this works.
The mouse.
I don't even see the
Oh, we know
mouse.
where it is, yeah.
In any case, there's a general residence district in Woods Hole. That's it, a very small thing. Most of the general residence district is in Falmouth Center and running up Palmer Avenue. There's a little bit of general residence district in East Falmouth on Route 28, and just a little bit in Metoxet, near where the post office is, in Wacoit, rather. But the location is sort of irrelevant, because accessory apartments are allowed in all residence districts, in all agricultural districts. It's just that they aren't allowed in the most logical place for them, the buffer area, the general residence district. So the bylaw that we submitted this year, simply says that accessory apartments will be allowed in general residence districts under the same rules that they're allowed in residential districts. That's all it says. And when it was discussed at the last town meeting, it was Article 8 of the April's town meeting, several people spoke and they said, well, we were trying to revise the accessory apartment bylaw. Let's wait until that's been done and bring it back in the fall. So the accessory apartment bylaw got revised. Some changes were added to address the concern that was being addressed at the last meeting, which was some limits on the number of bedrooms in coastal pond overlay districts. And so now that will be in the bylaw, and it will be applicable to any general residence zoned lots that are in the those coastal pond overlay districts. And so now hopefully, and I think that the subcommittee recommending changes to the accessory apartment bylaw should have then included the general residence district. I think it was an oversight once again. When it became apparent that that was occurring, I submitted the article which simply said in the general residence district 2. And I think that simply makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, any comments on this article? Hearing none, can I have a motion to close?
I move that we close the hearing on Article 15 and take it under advisement.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Article 15.
Sorry, mind if I use a?
If you like, yours is on there as well.
Yep, I have another one that I may end up using if,
I'm gonna use yours, Tom.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Kevin Clower. I'm an attorney with Ahmet Clower Law Firm here in Falmouth, and I am the petitioner on this article on behalf of a client. My client is the owner of 289 Old Main Road in North Falmouth. This article seeks to amend the present zoning. Presently, as you can see, this lot is a split zone lot. The red indicates a B3 zoning district. The beige indicates an RB zoning district. We're seeking to have the entirety of the lot be designated as B2. The reason for this is that the B2 district allows for multifamily housing by special permit of the Zoning Board of Appeals. Residential B does not. My client is seeking to renovate the existing structure on that lot, which is located towards the front in the B3 district, and it is historical. It's an historical district, as well as being a rather old structure in and of itself. In addition to that renovation, they're seeking to add multifamily housing in the rear portion of the lot, which would necessitate the rezoning. My client's open to a covenant relative to the rezoning of this property, restricting the area that would be rezoned for multifamily use, to either uses that would otherwise be allowed under residential B or multifamily use as would be allowed by B3. The town has undertaken similar covenants and supported similar rezoning for other properties. And what I pulled up here was 480 Main Street, which, just to give you some perspective, this building here is the Dunkin' Donuts building. This is the project that was done by Charlie Marzot in Coast to Coast Development about 10 years ago. And this rear portion of the lot here that juts out from the rest of the BR was rezoned from residential C zoning to business redevelopment with the caveat that a covenant was placed restricting the rezoned area for multifamily housing or those uses which would have otherwise been allowed under the residential C. We think that this is the outcome here would be a positive outcome. It's the addition of more housing stock to the town. We know that we have a need for additional housing. It is surrounded by largely business properties. This here is a salon, this here is a salon, this is the Superette. This building here is a small rental, which I believe is 2 units. This building here is the Warwick Associates offices. We have discussed this project with, this property here is under agreement. We've discussed this with the new owners. They're in support of the project as well. It would allow for simply, again, the residential uses to be expanded in that district. So I'd be happy to address any questions that the board may have at this time, or any questions the audience may have.
Any members of the board have a question?
I do.
Pat?
Although I was here with the other development that you mentioned, I do not recall how a covenant was attached to it with the rezoning. So I'm asking, because once the town meeting votes to rezone, what's to prevent anything to be done?
We'd be happy to prepare and submit the covenant prior to town meeting.
Okay.
I believe that's what was actually done in the past case as well.
It was a number of years ago, and I don't
Sure.
recall the details. on
Predates
it.
my time here, I'll tell you that much.
Okay.
Any members of the audience? One, then you. And then Patty, you getting up?
Two things. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Grant Walker. Are we able to know the street address of this property? No, okay.
Kidding.
No,
289 Old Main Road.
289. Thank you very much.
It's getting late, Mr. Walker. I thought we said what the address was. Excuse me. Pardon me.
So you really don't have it in for me? No. Secondly, if I may, I want to tell you that I'm tremendously encouraged. I'm not guaranteed, I'm not assured, but I am tremendously encouraged by your willingness to go back and forth with us. And I thank you, all of you board members, for your willingness to stay here all this time and to do this. I really appreciate it.
Well, that comment was out of order, but you got to keep it to the subject.
But that's all right, it makes me feel happy.
Next, I'm sorry. Excuse me, I shouldn't be joking, I'm sorry.
My name is Anthony Petrucci, Old Main Road, North Falmouth. My property is just down the street from 289. The covenant, I mean, this appears to be spot zoning, since it's only for one parcel. But it's interesting to hear that there would be a covenant placed on the property restricting it to multifamily, because we already have issues where, for instance, Epic Oyster has storage units, trailer units that abut residential properties. We have a multifamily house to the right of it that has storage units abutting residential properties. I'm not even sure if that's allowed under the zoning. But this covenant that was mentioned, would it become part of the deed to the property and permanent?
You have any more questions? That'll get answered. Yeah.
That's it. Thank you.
Generally, they get recorded, but I'll let the attorney answer that. Yes, that's why they write them up.
Happy to answer that question for Mr. Petrucci. Yes, the covenant would in fact be recorded at the registry and would run with the land. And just to address the concern, it's actually not spot zoning. Spot zoning is the singling out of one lot for different treatment from that accorded to similar surrounding land. This is simply an extension of that zoning district. It would, spot zoning would be if we took a lot in the middle of a residential C district and made one lot only business zoned with everything surrounding it residential B or C or whatever the case may be. So given that this is in fact a portion of this lot is already zoned B3 and it's a budding property is also B3, this is not spot zoning by any stretch of the imagination. And this is something that I think we're going to be perhaps looking at in the future. I know Mr. Bott said a number of times that he is very much in favor of if, having fully zoned lots as opposed to arbitrary lines through properties. I pay attention, Tom.
Yes.
I am Patricia Johnson. I live in North Falmouth. I would like the planning board to recommend indefinite postponement for this article. The reason is there are approximately 6 other properties on Old Main Road who have this B3 strip zone on their lots. I perceive that if we let this person change and add multifamily housing in his back part of his residential portion of his lot, that we will have open up the floodgates for at least 6 more people to apply for the same thing. In North Falmouth, we've had 2 recent areas that have been rezoned and are both getting multifamily housing on them. And one is the condominiums on the corner of, it's 270 Old Main Road. We rezoned a back corner of that lot to general residence. If you put a bigger piece up showing what North Falmouth looks like, you'd have a better idea. I have copied it out. I didn't have one that fit on this screen, but I did it myself. I took with there's more B3 strip zone on both sides of Old Main, particularly after you get beyond Pine Street in the corner of Wild Harbor Road and Pine, where there's a fire station and where we have the Wild Harbor General Store across the street from that and adjacent to the Wild Harbor General Store on the west side of Old Main are all have this strip B3 zone across the front. And the rest up by the Epic Oyster going down to 259, and on the opposite side of the street, we also have the strip zone. This strip zone also extended up Old County Road to where there used to be a, it's now a park, but where Sports Imports is. That's all B3 also, a strip zone. And we allowed another property on there, which had called Nye Park condominiums, to rezone that to B3. So we extended B3 in two other places, not one other place, and the general one rezone for the condominiums on the corner. So I think you have to look at the whole picture on North Falmouth with the B3 zone and not let the whole place, all the backyards, and change the looks of this part of town. So I'd like you to indefinitely postpone this. Don't allow it. It's just going to change a lot of things.
Thank you.
Do you have some questions? Do you want me to give you the handout that shows you?
What, I was just gonna ask a question of our planner. When we come time for discussion, will we have the ability to go out to the internet and go to Falmouth GIS and see the maps? Or do we have to produce new maps and put them up? We should have that ability to do it right now.
Well, if I'd gotten here earlier to practice that, maybe I've got the map up on my laptop, but I don't think I can project it directly right now.
Well, we need it for our discussion. I certainly know how to do it, but you can't do it on there?
I did it.
Oh, I know. I know you did. I'm just wondering if we could do it
Yeah,
on the
here.
screen so people could see.
I think you need a much bigger picture of North Falmouth than what's showing up here. And if you can't,
Give it a try?
Well, if you,
Falmouth GIS, does that get internet?
oh yeah, I'm sorry, I was thinking,
No.
I'm
I
with
think
you
all
now.
we need to do is.
we're gonna find out in a second.
I know how to do it, so I
Okay.
just would prefer that you do it. Okay. That was the whole reason why we had this set up here, so that we, when somebody asked a question like this, we could get an answer right away.
okay, yeah,
So this is the first time we've done this.
okay.
Hopefully-
Here's my
I'm gonna
little,
stand right here and make that show up on the map. You hold
Okay,
this
good.
so I can see what I'm doing.
okay. You have
This has
to,
been a dream to be able to answer this question this way.
that's black and white. Here it is.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
There you go. Look for the blue dot down the bottom. Or that should have popped up. Go ahead, right there, that'll do it. There's the blue, the earth. That should bring you right to it. And now put in the address.
289.
I'm a typing machine.
And now click on maps. Did you see the drop down for maps and then zoning? Ah, very good.
Gotta go. You're
That
not
help you, Patty?
far enough down. You're not far enough down. See? There. Now you're seeing the other strip of B3. This B3 strip on North Falmouth has been there forever, as far as I can determine, and I don't know why. But can I point with the pointer?
With the mouse, you can.
So what you're gonna do,
Put it down.
I'll put it down.
Yeah, and if you watch the, just.
Okay.
just
Whatever-
like
wherever
using
you
your
wanna point.
computer, so move your mouse, see your cursor right there? So,
Whoop,
sorry,
I don't want it to go smaller.
well, you're fine, we can fix that.
You can use the zoom in and zoom out.
Yeah, I can tell you
There you
two
go.
other things. It's very difficult using the town website to determine when we made zoning map changes, because they omit when we did, it sort of like jumps from like 2006 to 2014. There are 4 pages of zoning map changes, and they don't, they're incomplete, because they don't show when we did this one to GR.
So what you're gonna do is just move that mouse, and see that arrow right there?
Okay, good.
So the arrow, just move the
All right.
mouse around to where you wanna go, all right?
All right, stay with me.
I'll be over, okay, this
All right, right, this lot right here was rezoned B3. Only the front part of it was B3. And then we added that sometime in the early 2000s, and it's being cleared right now. That was one lot right there. And then we did GR right here. It's hard to see it almost because of the color, and that's allowed 4 additional units on the corner there with a nigh, it's called Megansett Shores. You see, and if you do this up here, it's another like possibility, and then all these houses right here can go back, and then down here, these B3s right here, this B3 can extend their B3. This one can extend the B3. Fortunately, it doesn't show on here. This big lot has put a CR on the back, so they cannot develop that with multifamily housing. But this one does not have, it's long, it goes all the way out here, and it does not have a conservation restriction on it. And over here, we have all the back part of this lot could have multifamily housing. And I just think you can't do that in North Falmouth without changing the character of North Falmouth. You should look at the whole thing. We had up here, because we fought it, and we got, a person bought this was B3, and there were 4 condominiums proposed on that lot, and a person came along and bought it, and it's a park now. But that shows you what you can do if you keep saying, well, I gotta do it because I have B3 in the front, I've gotta have my backyard a B3 too. And I think that's a big mistake, to just keep doing that. So
Thank
I
you.
would recommend indefinite postponement, and let's have a better option at looking at what's going on in North Falmouth.
Thank you.
Okay? Do you have your information?
And congratulations, Tom. I've been waiting for years to be able to do that at a meeting.
I'm just
Okay.
waiting to chart, can I go?
Thank
Well, I
you.
think that's okay.
That's fantastic.
She's recommending postpone, deferment.
Okay. Any other comments? We're ready to move on. Kevin, you have more to say?
Just, if I may, in response to some of the expressed concerns. You know, we do have a housing issue in town. We have an issue with having enough units. That's nothing new. Presently, if you have a split zone lot, you can take credit for the entire square footage and apply it to the portion that's zoned as to what you want. So in this particular case, the applicant could try to, or could take the credit for the entirety of the lot, which is 30,000 square feet, or give or take, and develop the units in the portion that's B3 in order to more appropriately develop those units in a way that does fit in with the character of the neighborhood. Allowing them to be built towards the rear of the lot is, I think, indisputably beneficial. And it's worth pointing out that this does not become a by right use. This becomes a special permit use. So this would still be subject to all the same requirements as it would otherwise, wherein it would be looked at for neighborhood character. It would be looked at for 240-216, and the benefits versus the detriments considered by the permitting authority. All this would allow is perhaps a more appropriate development than otherwise would occur if someone sought to develop the multifamily housing in the B3, in the portion presently zoned B3.
Anyone else?
I move that we close.
Yes? I was trying to keep the meeting moving.
I think saying it's more appropriate development does not take into character the fact that that's wooded lot. He can put, the developer can, it's a historic district, the house was built in like 1895 or something like that. So, but an appropriate accessory apartment could be built on the backside of that building and not wreck the whole, it's a very, very heavily vegetated there. And you're gonna take, I know what they do, they just strip the rest of the lot, which they can still do even without it being rezoned to B3. But I think that, you can get another unit there attached and without changing the zone. That's my point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Mr. Clower, do you, nope. Any other comment? Oh.
Which is what I was indicating briefly, which is that accessory apartments actually aren't allowed in the business district. It's residential only.
Yep.
That's the third time.
John?
I'm going to abstain from voting on this. I have not done this before, but I'm not going to vote on this.
We're not voting on it tonight, John.
Well, okay.
But one day.
But when you're ready.
Okay, I move that we close the hearing on Article 25 and take it under advisement.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Okay, Bad Martha's.
Applicant, okay, moving forward. Yeah, we,
Take a 5-minute break?
yes, 5-minute recess. with that article, and now we're,
Bad Martha.
applicant, Bad Martha's Farmers Brewery LLC, site plan review to construct a commercial building at the property located at 876 East Falmouth Highway by adding over 1,000 square feet of gross floor area and to require the addition of more than 5 parking spaces. I got a question for you. Well, the 5 parking spaces are figured, but if we're tearing down the building, are we really
Yeah, I
adding
mean,
more
really,
than?
really what we're here for is a modification of the existing site plan review.
Right, okay.
So, can I jump in? Sure.
Sure, I just had a question.
Do we have more? I mean, if we don't need to be here, I'll go home. Nothing would make me happier.
I was looking, go, quick.
Yeah. Do you need to go through any,
I think we have to have the plan up there, yeah. Why don't you walk us,
okay.
the big change, is it, well.
Sure. Let me,
That's
well,
a, that's a huge change. Let's go through the whole thing.
of course. So this is, for the record, my name's Kevin Clower. I'm an attorney with Ament Clower Law Firm here in Falmouth, and I represent Bad Martha Farmers Brewery LLC. They are now the owners of 876 East Falmouth Highway. As you will all likely recall, we were here in the spring for a site plan review in which this board approved the placement of a new building located in kind of the northeasterly corner of this site. The plan at that time, what we're looking at here today is the existing conditions plan, but the plan that we had approved envisioned the Oysters 2 remaining on site, of a new parking lot that was going to be rather expansive over the, almost the entirety of the lot, and then the Bad Martha's building located again in kind of the northeasterly corner, or where that existing building is shown right here. And what happened was, after we received all our approvals, as Oysters 2 started going through their process of pricing out their renovations, it became evident that the cost of renovations to that building were going to be essentially cost prohibitive. The plan had been for Oysters 2 to remain and lease back to the new owner, and as those costs became evident, they realized that they weren't able to do that. And their calculus was that it was better for them to cease operation and sell now without having to go through the cost of going through those renovations. So what we've proposed is a reimagining of the site, but largely what was approved previously. This building is in almost exactly the same location. The orientation of it has shifted just a little bit. This portion here had previously been on the west side. We're now locating it on the right. This is where Oysters 2 had been located and is going to be raised. We have been to the Historic Commission, and they have issued a waiver of the demolition delay bylaw. So they've approved the removal of that building because any historic significance that it had has largely been lost to renovations throughout the years. This revised plan is a reduction in the overall square footage of the lot by structures. It's a reduction in the overall parking required. Oysters 2 had almost 200 seats within the restaurant, requiring over 100 parking spots. We're proposing 90 some odd seats, I believe, and parking of, by Tom's calculus here, yeah, so we're showing 47 parking spaces. So it is a pretty significant reduction as to what's on the site presently. I can go over the specifics of the site from what we went through before, which is this is a 2.37 acre site located in East Falmouth. It's zoned largely B2 with a small portion on the northwestern edge being zoned agricultural. It's abutted to the west by town land and essentially to the north and east by Mahoney's. It is, the significant change here is obviously the removal of Oysters 2. The only other significant change is the entryway had been envisioned as being off Audubon Circle by obtaining an easement from Mahoney's, using a portion of the Mahoney site for our parking, which we no longer need to accommodate our parking. So we're seeking to maintain the existing curb cut. We did speak with Mr. Bott. He had asked us about locating the curb cut further to the west. There is a rather large elm tree, which the board had expressed concern about at our last hearing as to whether or not we could preserve that elm tree. That was part of the reason we didn't want to do it. And the other reason being timing and working with Mass DOT. is complicated and expensive and time-consuming when we have a perfectly serviceable curb cut that exists today, but will still receive a pretty substantial improvement in terms of the landscaping and care around it. Those are really the significant changes that I think are worth going over. The
What
removal.
about landscaping? You've taken out a great big building. We don't, now we
Sure.
don't know what we're gonna see there.
Well, do we have to, yep, so,
Yeah, one more for landscaping, I think.
Sort of.
Sort of,
They're using,
they're gonna go back to the middle.
There was gonna be a big berm.
so, no, that's still to be here. This, we show the berm here, and that berm was designed to prevent the parking, the lights from the parking lot from coming across the property. That's still to be located here, and the answer we'd given at the last hearing was our intent is to work very closely with Mahoney's next door to essentially have our landscaping be an extension of the landscaping they have across the front of their property. So that berm is to remain. We are showing some trees here. This area here is going to be cleared because it's cleared presently. We're removing a building from it, so it's not,
Hold on, folks. I can't hear.
it's not as though we remove the building and trees are underneath. So this will be cleared, and I think if you, we did show this as part of our drainage.
So landscaping, is that grass? What is it?
It's probably gonna be grass. I mean, it's gonna get planted after the removal of the building. It's gonna be graded
You have a
out.
plan that shows the green space areas.
In color, no. No, we don't. This is,
You have one that shows it with
yeah, I mean,
hash marks or something? that we
the
can tell
green
the
space is everything but for the parking area.
So everything that's not, see, one of the things we're gonna have to do is when this is done, we're gonna come out and look at it and see what, or did you plan it, did you build it the way you showed it to us tonight?
So, I mean, we're removing a building that's gonna get graded out, that'll get seeded, that,
Become grass.
it'll become grass.
Just lawn, you're gonna mow it.
Yeah.
Go to the drainage, it showed loam and seed.
So,
What's that noise?
that's a phone.
There's something buzzing.
Someone didn't listen to your instructions at the beginning of the meeting.
It's funny, it sounds like it's coming under my desk here. I don't know what it is.
So, I mean, to answer your question, Mr. Fox, essentially everything that's not parking will be grass or planted. This is going to be, I think, so loam and seed all disturbed areas in accordance with the Falmouth Nitrogen Control Bylaw. Chapter 237 is what Mr. Bunker's note says. So this area is all disturbed. That's going to get, after the building comes out, that area will all be repaired, graded, and planted with loam and seed. And then everything else here is going to be, what's shown here is the pavement area. That existing two-bedroom house is still to remain, as was on the last plan. And, you know, over time, whether or not this area gets landscaped more thoroughly or planted with
What's the
trees is.
topography? That's where the building was.
Yeah.
Okay, is that, the number's going down? Is that a hole?
So it goes from a grade of 31 feet down to a grade of 26 feet at the lowest point here.
Are you making a retention pond there? What's
So
going on?
that's the drainage retention basin, in order to essentially keep everything away from this portion of the
Okay.
lot. Because this area of the lot originally had been graded.
So it's a vegetated basin is what we're gonna see there, instead of a building. Is that, I'm trying to get an understanding of the difference between the two. That's what it looks like. Okay, now I got it. If it was green, I could have probably figured that out a little easier. You guys all see it? Okay. Are you done? We have a bunch of questions. I'm gonna turn it
Sure,
over to the board for questions
I'm happy,
now.
happy to
I'm
answer
gonna
any
start at
questions.
this end with Paul. We haven't heard from you tonight for a while.
Okay, the last time you came before us, obviously the restaurant was gonna be there, and now it's no longer there. I understand it closed down last week. Audubon Circle will be not developed then?
Correct.
With,
Well, not by us, certainly.
It's not on the site. It's not on our plan.
I know, but it was a joint agreement between Mahoney.
We were going to enter into an easement agreement by which Bad Martha would develop the portion needed for access.
Now is as you've shown up there, not opposite Carolyn Lane, a little bit offset, is that
Well,
correct?
essentially, yeah, exactly.
And you're not adjusting the building to another area in the site, you're just leaving where it was before?
Correct.
Okay. So parking and everything is all the same, and the whole building site is the same.
The building is cited the same. The parking is substantially less because of the reduction in required parking. Previously, if you recall, there was actually going to be a new curb cut over here. This area was all going to be developed as parking. This was going to be parking back here. Throughout the lot, there would be some more parking along this side here. So there's a really substantial reduction in the parking on site.
I just don't remember all those contours in that site.
Well, there was a building there. And the plan had been to grade the lot, to bring in a substantial amount of fill and to grade the lot moving in a westerly direction. So right now, this is about 4 or 5 feet lower than this area here. So they were gonna have to raise that grade in order to have that be a workable flow. They're no longer doing that, so you didn't see a lot of those grades. Not only, and I didn't mean to be flip by saying there was a building there, but there was a building there in addition to substantially less grading and fill being brought into the site.
The grade is pretty much parallel to the road grade.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I can let someone who knows what he's talking about talk about the grading.
Grading and drainage too, we'd like to have you review that for us, Tom.
I'm getting it.
Yes, for the record, my name is Tom Bunker with BSS Design. I'm responsible for this grading. But to answer that question, as Kevin said, there was a building there, so what do we have? Yeah, I just want to look at find my controls here. So, see, the building is, and if you look on the
Yeah,
street
there
side
it
of the
is.
building, see, there's a bunch of contours right here? And a bunch of contours, see, it goes up. This whole area here was leveled and filled, and there's a slope here. So now if you go back to this, basically you've taken the building out and connected the contours across from, you see the change from the dash line, those are the existing contours, and then the solid lines are the proposed contours. So basically you just connected the contours from one side of the building to the other, going up. So it's the same height as it was across the front of the building and then across the back of the building. And then where some of that cellar hole is coming out, it was keeping a drainage basin in the middle of the lot there. So the the drainage does go, there's the 31 contour right here. So basically the site is at 31 and in the back, the water will drain from near the back property line down toward the basin. It will drain from the front of the building here, or the side, the west side of the building, down across into this basin. And then also from Audubon Circle, where we will have a paved access way, so that this is something that the Mahoney's people wanted to be able to get here, and likewise, people here can go over and buy their geraniums. But anyway, this slopes all the way downhill.
So everything's
into
pitched to
this.
that basin now.
Correct.
What about the soil conditions? Are we ever gonna have standing water there? I mean, that looks,
I don't expect, this basin has double the volume of the 25-year storm.
okay, that's what I wanted to hear.
And that there's a review of it, and by the engineering department, and Scott Schluter in the engineering department said it looked like it would handle the 25-year storm, but it actually will double the volume. He made a comment about this basin coming up to the 30 contour, which is right here, below it, not into the pavement, just below the pavement, but the volume I calculated to the 30-foot contour is, like I said, double the volume of a 25-year storm. That's even not counting for any infiltration. On one of the last pages, we do have the soil tests, and everywhere there is sand. We're not going to leave the surface. The surface will have loam on it, but it'll be sandy loam, and it will infiltrate.
Are there any catch basins on the site? Could you point them out? If there are any,
There are two in this back corner here, in this parking and delivery area. There's just because it just couldn't
because you
work to
can't
go
get to your
under.
main basin without flowing it through. So
No.
basically, you're pitching everything into there that you can.
Except the back
Except the
corner where you
back
have
corner.
two catch basins, one here, and two leaching pits, which is a little oversized for that area. That includes roof drains, so the entire structure, plus that amount of pavement goes into those two leaching pits. Everything else
Do
will
the
go
roof
down.
drains go to those leaching, are they
Yes.
piped right to it, so they're not going to the parking lot, they're going into the ground and into the pit?
They go into, and one of Scott's reviews said that those roof drains should go into the pits and not into the catch basins, and we can reroute those pipes. But they're going into the leaching pits
Okay.
here.
Before you
Go ahead,
follow up, thank you for the drainage comments. One final question on the septic system.
Yes.
Is it gonna be reduced? Because last time you had both the restaurant and the brewery connected.
It's reduced substantially. This is, before it was close to 10,000 gallons a day.
Is that two-story, two-bedroom house connected to it, or is that still on their own system?
We're keeping the own system as far as it hasn't been shown to fail, but it's being reduced from almost 10,000, it's being reduced by more than 6,000 gallons a day to under 3,000.
So the drainage system, everything be reduced?
Everything,
Considerably.
all impacts are reduced considerably.
Thank you.
Pam?
So the basin is actually below the existing building now, below where Oysters Two is.
Yes.
And is there any plan to develop that at any point in time?
There are no plans now, no.
Not now.
If it were to be developed, then we'd have to find other drainage.
Right, okay.
John, you got anything?
No.
Pat?
Yes, I do. A couple of things that are centered around two things. First of all, it's a rather large and therefore old elm tree. Has anybody assessed the condition of the elm?
I don't know that a certified arborist have. I've looked at it. I mean, it looks like a nice tree. I can't say whether it has Dutch elm or anything.
Well, they start to look stressed, and so you haven't seen any stress with it then?
I'm not qualified to say that.
No, I know, but
But
I've seen enough elms with stress, and so that's not visibly stressed, is what I
it
would say.
didn't lose its leaves this year as some on,
Yeah.
the one on the Village Green. I could tell when that,
Right,
not the village,
yeah.
the library lawn, I could tell when that was stressed.
Yeah,
and knew it
that's,
had to come down.
but no, it looks healthy.
Yeah.
And you're not an arborist, and I know that. Okay, now, since it's healthy, yes, I agree that we should try to save it, but I still would like to see the drive pulled over to be more across from Carolyn Lane. And I understand the concerns with getting a mass permit for a street opening. I'm wondering if both could happen, if you could use the original drive, at the same time apply to have that moved over however much you could without disturbing the tree. And again, you'd have to have an arborist say, how far could you do that?
It's feasible. It would not be right across from it. I know when we did the bike path by the train station, there was great care not to put pavement over the roots
I
on
know
that
that,
elm tree
yeah.
for quite a distance.
Mhm.
There's the tree, there's MassDOT and going before all of them, and then there's also all the utilities, because there's a pole, a
Oh,
utility pole right
okay.
here, which is very
Okay, I'm
time-consuming and
understanding the
expensive.
problem way better now, thank you.
It's a lot in the way of moving that.
Mhm.
Jim, you have anything?
Nope, all done.
So the building elevations we saw before are, do you have new ones, or they're just gonna be?
I mean, we have the exterior non-colored ones that are revised just to
But we
show.
have the color ones on
Yep.
file.
Yeah, and we do have the colored ones here. The only difference
They
is
don't show,
this side is on this, the barn side, or the this portion here is now on the eastern side as opposed to the western.
180 degree, it's a mirror image flip. So where before the entrance faced east, now the entrance faces west.
So I think that gives you a better idea.
So if we walked around and looked at it from the other way, it'd be the same as it was before.
Exactly.
I'm just trying to see how we're gonna reconcile with what you've given us and what we approve when we go back to check what
So
you
we do
built.
have all new elevations and plans.
Right, all new elevations and plans are just not colorized, we'll have to refer.
You just don't have a colored rendering.
And the color remains the same, the color renderings remain the same, the only difference here is this portion, the brewery portion itself is gonna be located on the eastern side.
Tom, you got any questions about the changes? I mean, what thing I'm concerned is, are they providing you enough to go back at the end and say, yeah, this is exactly what you proposed?
Well, we've had the discussion about lining things up with the street and trying to pull it over as much as possible, so that's the board's call. And I didn't want them to start tweaking their plan to deal with the drainage issues that our engineering department pointed out if the board was gonna say the entrance is fine. So at this point, if the board is fine with the entrance, they just need to get right with the drainage. One of the things that's particularly unique about this is you usually would have a test pit in the bottom of a drainage basin, so you know how it's gonna act, but you can't because there's a building in the way. And in Scott's comments, he talks about how you would have to make sure that appropriate materials were excavated from the site, and appropriate materials brought in. Scott has some other comments about just how the drainage works, no pre-treatment before it gets to the forebay. It's a tad in the weeds for sort of the listening audience at home, but Scott has some concerns about pre-treatment before stormwater heads into that basin, because right now it just sort of sheets through a couple of asphalt aprons. There's no pre-treatment before it gets into the basin.
Have we received all his referrals on this, or are we waiting until we decide on the curb cut?
Well, we've gotten his from 921, so we've got it out, we've got his.
There was a referral that was that, okay, I received that today.
Yeah. So essentially, the questions largely deal with an aisle width here and largely how the drainage is gonna work. And right now, there's not enough information for Scott to be comfortable with the drainage on the site. He'd like to see some pre-treatment before he goes into that basin.
Have you seen those comments
We
yet?
got those comments this afternoon.
And they're not reflected on the plan?
Not yet, not yet.
I was trying to avoid coming back.
Well, I would ask perhaps, Tom can work with Scott to satisfactorily address the drainage. But that wouldn't affect, it certainly affects the drainage plan, but not necessarily the site plan, which would allow us to.
You're on the same plan, Kevin.
Same plan set, same plan set.
Right.
So, but that would allow us to, kind of start this process a little bit sooner, because time is really of the essence for the applicant.
So if the board is comfortable with the layout as presented, I believe that the engineering department and I can resolve the issues of making sure that the drainage is gonna work.
Paul, are you comfortable with it?
Yeah, I am. I think it's fine. I think the change the architect made to the building and so forth early on were very helpful. I didn't like the corrugated middle side, but I think the layout's fine. I think what you're proposing looks very well. I'm just curious what the intended construction schedule is. As soon as you get permission to
Soon?
move forward, it's going to be delayed for a couple of years.
No, they have visions of being open next summer, which,
When?
next summer. It's ambitious, but
So I might suggest that the board could move to approve the site plan contingent on the final drainage being developed and approved by the Falmouth Engineering Division.
Move it.
Yep.
Second.
Second.
Moved in second, all in favor? Aye.
I should have more hearings at 10 o'clock at night.
Well, you did such a good job last time, you generated a lot of goodwill.
Guys, thank you very much. We appreciate your time,
Yeah.
especially on a night like tonight.
Goes much quicker after 10 o'clock at night.
Oh, God.
Who was the move in second on that, please?
Pam?
Seconded.
And Pat, they reversed. Pam was first, Pat was second.
I couldn't say second one more time.
Thank you.
Oh, brother.
All right, if I may bring one point to the board's attention, we have actually a decision for site plan. I thought it was a special permit, but we just have 5 people here, so
Yep.
it's not a supermajority vote on the site plan. I was concerned it was that Borghese was a special permit, and we'd need to have 100% of the votes, but you just simply need a majority to approve the site plan for 437 Wild Harbor Road that you seem quite content with at our last meeting.
Does everyone recall? I think we're all in favor. We just held it up to give it, we didn't want to do it the same night. It was just a form technique, so.
Move to approve.
We got a motion?
There's a motion right here.
Oh, well, Pat, I'm sorry. We have to read the motion, you're correct.
Yeah, we do.
We do.
We do, I do, is what
Yeah,
you're saying, yeah, okay. I move that the planning board vote to approve the application of Carolyn Parton under Article 39, site plan review of the zoning bylaw for a plan entitled Plot Plan Existing Conditions Prepared for Carolyn Parton, 437 Wild Harbor Road, North Falmouth, Massachusetts, prepared by BSS Design, dated August 3, 2018, revised August 27, 2018, scale 1 inch equals 20 feet, 3 sheets, along with floor plans entitled Addition and Renovations to the Parton Residence at 437 Wild Harbor Road, North Falmouth, Massachusetts, prepared by Integrata Architecture and Construction, 6 sheets, dated April 12, 2018, with the following findings and conditions. Findings: the applicant, Carolyn Parton, seeks to create a 607 square foot accessory apartment within a new addition to the primary residence located at 437 Wild Harbor Road, map number 0426001000, with associated parking proposed to existing on-site parking. The subject parcel is 68,642 square feet and zoned residential A, RA, with the primary land use as a single-family residence. The total square footage of the principal structure is 2,181 square feet. The percentage of the total floor area of the accessory apartment in relation to the total floor area of the principal dwelling is 28%. The bedroom count of the single-family residence will remain at 5, with 1 bedroom in an accessory apartment for a total of 6 bedrooms. The building commissioner designated Wild Harbor Road as the primary front yard to alleviate the property's pre-existing non-conforming status. Previous front yard setback to Westwood Road was 19.9 feet, less than the allowed 25-foot setback required by the town's zoning bylaw. The subject lot is located on the corner of Wild Harbor Road and Westwood Road. Section 240-13 requires the applicant to designate one of the streets abutting a corner lot to have a primary front yard. The planning board's design review is restricted to the exterior of the building and defers to the building commissioner's review in regard to issues related to building code, including but not limited to safe egress and fire separation from the proposed apartment floor plan and the surrounding space within the primary residence and addition. The planning board finds the architectural effect is that of a single-family residence and comports with the guidelines of the accessory apartment bylaw. The subject property is located in the Wild Harbor Coastal Overlay. The 6 bedrooms proposed on the 68,642 square foot lot is less than the 1 bedroom per 10,000 square feet of lot space needed to require the enhanced nitrogen removal system proposed within the coastal pond overlay districts. The planning board defers to the Board of Health on the regulation of nitrogen loading and the required waste disposal system.
Would you like me to read for a while, Madam Vice Chair? I'd be happy to.
You're hearing my sleepy quote.
If it's okay, I don't.
No, I'm fine. Findings pursuant to section 240-223I of the zoning bylaw. A, only 1 accessory apartment shall be allowed per lot, and the above referenced application plans comply with this requirement. B, either the principal dwelling or accessory apartment must be owner occupied for a period of 7 months in every calendar year, or owned by a nonprofit organization or government authority whose purpose is to provide affordable housing. The board will condition its decision accordingly. C, either the principal dwelling or accessory apartment may be rented, but not both during the 5 months the owner occupant may be absent. Rental periods shall be no less than 6 months, and weekly/monthly rentals, summer rentals so-called, are expressly prohibited. Neither the principal dwelling nor accessory apartment shall be used as commercial accommodations at any time. The board will condition its decision accordingly. D, the accessory apartment shall have no more than 2 bedrooms and a maximum of 800 square feet of floor area, or 40% of the floor area of the principal dwelling, whichever is less. The above referenced plans comply with this requirement. E, the total number of bedrooms on the lot shall not exceed 4 when the lot contains less than 20,000 square feet. The lot contains 68,642 square feet of upland. Therefore, this requirement is non-applicable. F, the board makes no finding on nitrogen loading and defers to the Board of Health for review. G, the board finds the architectural effect is that of a single-family residence and compatible with the surrounding neighborhood and intent of the bylaw. H, the application for site plan review shall include the information contained in section 240-195C unless waived by the planning board. The board finds the information provided satisfactory in order to make a decision. Conditions: 1, the plan shall be constructed as approved. Any changes shall be reviewed by the planning board to determine if a modification of this decision is necessary pursuant to section 240-183B of the zoning bylaw. No permit for full or partial occupancy shall be issued until the planning board is satisfied with that the conditions of this approval and predecessor approvals have been met. 2, either the principal dwelling or accessory apartment must be owner-occupied for a period of 7 months in every calendar year, or owned by a nonprofit organization or government authority whose purpose is to provide affordable housing. An affidavit shall be submitted annually to the building commissioner, signed by the property owner, attesting that the principal dwelling or accessory apartment has been owner-occupied for a period of 7 months and not otherwise rented as set forth above. 3, either the principal dwelling or accessory apartment may be rented, but not both during the 5 months the owner-occupant may be absent. Rental period shall be no less than 6 months, and weekly/monthly rentals, summer rentals so-called, are expressly prohibited. Neither the principal dwelling nor accessory apartment shall be used as commercial accommodations at any time. Man, I need a second.
Second.
Way to go.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Oh, God. Can I move adjournment?
No, we can't,
Why not?
because we have a couple more things.
Okay.
We'll try to keep them limited. Planning board discussion, we're not gonna have any discussion tonight on any of the agendas. We'll do that later, correct? All in favor of that?
Yeah.
We've taken them all under advisement. They'll all be up at another time. All the hearings we just had. You wanna discuss them tonight, Paul? Okay. Yeah.
I'm having so much fun now.
I can tell.
Tom, you can tell we're not used to meetings with this much stuff on it. Okay, Davis Straits Multifamily District, we keep that on it, just quickly. I am trying to get, form-based code FCTV show. We're gonna be talking with them this week and probably next week, actually trying to do it. So that's just something we're working on. That's all related to Davis Straits. Disseminate visual preference survey. Have you all gotten the?
Yeah, but I couldn't do it on my computer.
No, I got booted off. Timed out.
Well, that's important, because we want to get that to town meeting members, and I got it direct from the Cape Cod Commission. There was no problem at all on mine.
I got timed out. It said to refresh. I don't have a refresh button.
Yeah, you just have to shut it down and reboot it, but.
Yeah, but if
but
I did that, I
tried
knew
that,
it'd boot
and
me
I
out
s-
again.
And I still couldn't do it. For some reason, it just wasn't loading. I have a lot of trouble in North Falmouth. Xfinity is just terrible.
It was-
Mine loaded.
Are you taking it in your browser, in your web browser, in like Chrome? Is it online, you're doing it?
Yeah.
So if you hit F5, it'll refresh the page.
Oh, thank you, because I didn't know that. F5 is refresh, okay. I used to have a refresh button, and in Microsoft, it is infinite.
Your toolbar.
Well, this is kind of important, because this is the beginning of the public outreach and getting the input, and we're trying to send this to all town meeting members and we were asked to send it to as many people as possible. I want to make sure we're sending it, when we do send it, in a format that everyone can do it. So let's test it a little bit, okay?
Well, and I think the question was that we discussed is, in getting this information out to folks, the question was, should we send it to town meeting members?
Yes.
We had this discussion about should we or should we not, but I don't think that we wanted to make that decision.
Right, that was
on our
right. It
own.
was me making the decision, and I'm supposed to be asking the board.
That's-
Correct. I had talked to Tom saying I wanted to send that link. I was hoping you had seen it.
I did see it.
And I wanted to send it to all town meeting members because starting getting their input on the changes that are coming with form-based code, if they start seeing that, they'll get a general idea of what we're doing.
I think that's a great idea.
Is anyone opposed to that idea? So it sounds like we got approval, Tom.
Okay,
Could you resend it to me,
I'll bet we can.
would you, please? Thank you.
Will do.
General correspondence, I did see something, I read it, September 14th, who was sent by Dan Webb, we heard from him tonight. He made all the same points that he made in person. Have you chance to see this? But he was here and
Right.
spoke 10 times,
Yes, he did.
so I think we
20 times more than that. letter.
Yeah, so we got that. Future agenda items.
If I may, just one other thing, in your correspondence, you also had a flyer regarding the Citizens Planning Training Collaborative classes that are coming up. They come up in the fall, in October, November. In my opinion, there's not a better value on the planet than the $35 you spend to go to a CPTC work session. It's 2 hours, it's $35. You get a booklet that talks about things such as site plans, writing reasonable decisions. I don't recommend the class on October 29th necessarily, on roles and responsibilities of the planning board.
You do not.
I don't.
That's yours.
I wasn't gonna say that, but that's the one I'm teaching, yes.
All over the place.
Why,
These
I just-
classes.
why
are
do you
so-
not
Question, why,
recommend
we
that?
don't have anything that's close to here. What is the nearest one?
Taunton.
Taunton.
Or-
Well, there's a couple on the Cape.
There's one in Harwich.
The people in Massachusetts think the Cape is like really close together. I found out there's some places that are further away on the Cape than other places you might not expect. So there are a couple of sessions proposed for, I think, Harwich.
Why don't you recommend the one, part one that you're giving?
Just because I think there's better instructors than me. They were desperate. That's a quote. We're desperate. Would you do this?
I really wanted to go to one.
And I get to go to Taunton.
But they're so far away from me. I just,
Taunton is not too far.
Well, and I don't want to belabor this, but we've had some discussions with some of our friends on the Vineyard about potentially holding a couple classes here. Yeah. It's $35 a head for the sessions. For $400, you can do your own session here, and we might look at doing something like that to bring some of the local towns down and do a couple of sessions if we see something we think is of value.
this would have to be next year though, right? If we do this.
After the season, so it'd be in the next calendar year. I'm not gonna try to squeeze anything in.
No, but I would really be in favor of reaching out to the people in the Vineyard and splitting it with them and doing one here. I think that would be a good idea,
We're already having that chat.
because that's what, I would go to two of them if you did it, you know?
Oh, yeah.
I'd
I mean,
much prefer
it's
that.
To go for 2 hours, I mean, there's one in Orleans, Planning with Community Support. And these are all butting up right against our town meeting.
Yeah, there's two seasons for CPTC. One is the fall, where they have these individual classes, and then in March, they have their annual conference, which is usually in Worcester at the College of the Holy Cross. You can go to Worcester, you can get 3 sessions in, and the lunch is fabulous. The green beans are worth the drive. No, true story.
Tom, I think you ought to let them know that. Let them know that the green beans are worth the trip.
Every time I talk about the conference, I mention that.
Okay,
All right.
so anyone, I'm gonna keep moving, all right? Very good. Future agenda items, we got another meeting on Thursday, folks. I don't think we're talking about anything else right now.
Yes, thanks for the plug. Thursday, joint meeting, Planning Board, Zoning Board of Appeals, to get into the weeds on recodification and talk about some policy issues for the zoning bylaw.
And it's
time is it?
everything on the agenda, 6 o'clock, right?
6 o'clock this room.
And that completes our agenda.
Is that here?
Oh, I move adjournment.
Second,
Adjourned.
third.